Mana aku kok belum kelihatan nih.
Ya, pakai hari ini ya.
Apa jadi?
Ini aja. Udah okein soalnya medical ada yang jalan.
Pesan Grabcar hemat sekarang.
Jalan ya.
Sobat hemat buat jalan ke kantor.
Bu Ari, untuk rumah Mas Aris
Harganya 7 juta. Itu ada Yusrina, bayi Yusrina BPLR. Belinya 1.900.000, walinya 11 kelas. Setelah laporan dari BP, yang lain ada tambahan.
Mbak itu
Nanti korban ini terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bintis bilang ke Sarawak dia aja nggak beli.
Just need the HMO typing information between the patient and donor to see that the differences are at the epitope level. And
Terus habis itu
Ya.
tambahan Juli.
Tes 1, 2. Tes 1, 2.
Masuk, Bu, masuk.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Bapak Ibu. Assalamualaikum. Hari ini kita mengikuti webinar. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Webinar kali ini berjudul Pros and Cons Unveiled, The Realities of Sponsored and Investigator-Initiated Trial. Mohon izin selanjutnya kami akan menggunakan bahasa Inggris selama webinar ini karena kita ada undangan dan speaker dari luar. Good morning everyone, welcome in today's webinar of the Pros and Cons Unveiled, The Realities of Sponsored and Investigator-Initiated Trial. We are excited to have you with us as we dive into this important discussion that will explore different perspectives from both industry-sponsored and investigator-initiated trial. Before we start, I would like to go over a few housekeeping rules. Recording, please note that this session is being recorded and will be live streamed on YouTube at BB Binomika. Microphones and cameras, kindly please keep your microphones muted and your camera on during the presentation to minimize distraction. Questions, if you have any questions during the session, feel free to type them into the chat box. We will address them during the Q&A segment after the presentation. Now, to officially open today's webinar, I would like to invite our Minister of Health, Bapak Budi Gunadi Sadikin, to deliver the remarks to officially introduce the Indonesia Clinical Research Center, INA-CRC, as the leading center for the transformation of clinical ecosystem in Indonesia, clinical research ecosystem in Indonesia, and Clinical Research Unit CRU as the implementer of clinical research. Please join me in welcoming Bapak Budi Gunadi Sadikin.
Indonesia dengan keanekaragaman genetik dan kondisi kesehatan yang beragam memiliki keunikan yang bisa menjadi potensi besar dalam clinical trial. Selain mendukung inovasi kesehatan, keberadaan clinical trial atau uji klinis di Indonesia juga memberikan peluang bagi pasien untuk mendapatkan akses pertama terhadap pengobatan dengan teknologi baru sehingga diharapkan dapat mempercepat kesembuhan. Untuk mendukung peningkatan kapasitas uji klinis di Indonesia, Kementerian Kesehatan membentuk Clinical Research Center atau CRC dan Clinical Research Unit atau CRU. Clinical Research Center atau CRC dibentuk untuk dapat membangun ekosistem dan network uji klinis di Indonesia. Clinical Research Center atau CRC diharapkan juga dapat membantu meningkatkan kemampuan dan kualitas uji klinis di Clinical Research Unit atau CRU di rumah sakit. CRC juga diharapkan bisa mendorong para peneliti untuk melakukan penelitian dengan output produk atau inovasi yang dapat digunakan untuk pencegahan dan treatment yang berkualitas bagi pasien. Saya Menteri Kesehatan Republik Indonesia mendukung aksi perubahan ini. Saya harap CRC dapat menjadi one-stop center untuk uji klinis bagi sponsor, industri, dan CRU, sehingga Indonesia dapat menjadi hub uji klinik di Asia dan global.
Thank you, Bapak Budi Gunadi Sadikin. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Azhar Jaya, as the Director General of Health Services, Ministry of Health of Indonesia, to deliver the welcoming remarks. Dr. Azhar Jaya has been a key advocate for advancing clinical research in Indonesia and plays a pivotal role in shaping national health policies. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Azhar Jaya.
Distinguished speakers, Asa Tanabalan from Clinical Research Malaysia, Dr. Saiful Safwan MD Sani, Head of the Clinical Trial Hub Cluster, Ministry of Health Malaysia, Ami Prawira, Cancer Trials and Research Unit, Prince of Wales Hospital, Sydney, Australia, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, greeting to all of us. It is an honor to welcome you today webinar on pros and cons unveiled, the reality of sponsored and investigator-initiated trials. Clinical trials are vital in advancing medical science, driving innovation, and offering hope to patients worldwide. I extend my sincere thanks to our distinguished speaker from Malaysia and Australia for their contributions. We hope this marks the beginning of a fruitful collaboration in clinical research. In Indonesia, clinical research is gaining significant momentum. Although challenging remains, we are actively addressing this through regulatory reform, infrastructure development, and strategic investment. The INA-CRC under BB Binomika plays a pivotal role in streamlining regulatory process and offering comprehensive support to researchers. This effort aims to position Indonesia as a leading clinical research hub in Asia, ensuring that the highest standard for clinical trials and consistently upheld. Ladies and gentlemen, as we gather today, it is essential to recognize the unique strengths and challenges of both sponsored and investigator-initiated trials. Sponsored trials, typically funded by the pharmaceutical industry, benefit from substantial resource and establish framework that accelerate the development of new treatment. In contrast, investigator-initiated trials offer researchers the freedom to explore innovative and less commercially driven areas of science, often leading to groundbreaking discoveries. However, both approaches face challenges such as securing funding, navigating regulatory recruitment, and maintaining researchers' independence. The key to advancing our clinical research ecosystem lies in finding a balance between these two models, encouraging collaboration and ensuring that both contribute to the progress of science and the improvement of patient care. Ladies and gentlemen, today webinar present a great opportunity to delve into key issues. I encourage you to all you engage actively and share your insight, which will contribute to creating a clinical trial environment in Indonesia that prioritizes innovation, ethics, and patient well-being. I hope that with this webinar, the clinical research unit in hospital will be able to enhance their capacity and prepare to strengthen their CRU, ensuring they are well equipped both in terms of infrastructure and human research to conduct clinical trial effectively. Thank you all for participating in this important discussion. I look forward to a productive session ahead and hope it is inspired future collaboration in the field of clinical research. Before I conclude my remarks, please allow me to share a closing pantun. Guiding the ship through tides so wide, CRU and CRC light the trail. With more trials, new treatments applied, bringing hope the patient, we shall prevail. Once again, thank you, and I wish you all a successful webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bapak Ansarjaya, for those insightful opening remarks and for your continued leadership in fostering innovation in clinical research. Now, to guide us through today's program, I'm pleased to introduce our esteemed moderator, Ibu Indri Lusramiati, APT MSc, as the head of Balai Besar Biomedis and Genomika Kesehatan, or the Biomedical and Genomic Health Center, the institute under the Directorate General of Health Services, Ministry of Health of Indonesia, that hosts the Indonesia Clinical Research Center in ICRC and brings extensive experience in clinical research, regulatory affairs, and trial management. We are honored to have Ms. Indri Lusramiati leading this session today. Please join me in welcoming Ibu Indri.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Dona. So good morning, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I hope all the participants are excited as I'm very excited today because this is going to be our first webinars. So good morning, distinguished speakers, guests, and participants. Welcome to today's webinar. So as Pak Ansarjaya and also Pak Menkes already stated in the beginning that clinical trials have become a priority in Indonesia, with the Minister of Health establishing clinical research center and clinical research units to position Indonesia as a leading hub for clinical trials in the regions. These trials are vital for advancing medical science and improving patient access to new treatments. So today, we will explore the differences between the sponsored and investigator-initiated trials, focusing on key aspects like funding, regulatory process, and investigators' independence. Our expert speakers will provide valuable insights on how these trials impact medical research and innovations. So I encourage all of you to engage actively, share your thoughts, and ask questions to enhance the discussions. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our first speaker. So Ms. Asha Tanabalan, who will share her insight on maximizing opportunities in sponsored clinical trials lesson from Malaysia. So Asha has been with Clinical Research Malaysia since 2012 and currently as the Senior Business Development Manager, focusing on business strategy, partnership with pharmaceutical and biotech companies, and enhancing Malaysia's global presence in clinical trials. So please join me in welcoming Asha. So Asha, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ibu Indri. And I do hope everyone can hear me clearly. Firstly, I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to present today and to share a little bit about Malaysia's story in terms of sponsored clinical trials. As introduced by Ibu Indri earlier, I'm the Senior Business Development Manager. I take care of the business relations and corporate communications within Clinical Research Malaysia. And my topic today is on maximizing opportunities in sponsored clinical trials, lessons from Malaysia. Could move to the next slide. Thank you very much. So maybe just to start with, let me share a little more about Clinical Research Malaysia so everyone has a bit of understanding in terms of our background. Clinical Research Malaysia is an organization that's been set up as a Ministry of Health company back in 2012. And the main purpose why we were set up is mainly to drive and enable sponsored clinical research in Malaysia. This is a government initiative. It was going back to the National Economic Plan that was established back in 2010. Now, being an MOH company, we are also a site management organization for many of the Ministry of Health sites, mainly to facilitate investigators, that is the clinicians, in conducting clinical trials. That being said, we are also a one-stop center for the nation to facilitate industry members when they want to conduct clinical trials in the country. We have been an organization that's been self-sustainable since 2019, meaning we no longer receive any more funds from the government, and we've been running on our own profit and loss line since 2019. But most importantly, because we are a one-stop center for the nation, we also need to be aligned as a global trusted research management organization. That is why CRM has both the Quality Management System ISO standards as well as the anti-bribery management system ISO standards in place within the organization. And this is very much aligned to a lot of the services that we do. Of course, we've hit our 10-year milestone back in 2022, but we are still going strong in 2024 as a 12-year-old organization. Maybe young, relatively young compared to a lot of other similar organizations out there, but the sponsored clinical research ecosystem in Malaysia has been flourishing, and we do hope to see an upward trend, not just in Malaysia, but also in the region as well. Could move to the next slide. Now, CRM goes by these guiding principles of humanity, stability, and sustainability. Now, when we talk about sponsored clinical research, at the end of the day, we want to bring in innovative therapies that could really address the unmet needs of our patients here, especially the patients that have exhausted all the standard therapies that are available in the hospitals or in the institutions. So this is where clinical trials are often seen as a hope, and this is where we want to bring in sponsored clinical trials that could really address these needs. Now, when you conduct sponsored clinical trials, it needs to be aligned to a lot of global standards and needs to also meet the regulations that's been set. And this is why also when conducting sponsored clinical trials, it needs to also have a very stable ecosystem where we can deliver with speed, quality, and reliability. Often enough, industry and stakeholders see this as a pulling factor, and they would continue investing in conducting sponsored clinical trials if the nation could continuously provide these qualities when it comes to delivering clinical trials. Finally, sustainability is also talking and reflecting back to CRM as an organization, not just remaining aligned to our ISO standards of QMS and ABMS, but ensuring we keep up to our core values, our code of conduct, especially as we function in providing our service as a clinical research service provider. Now, the next slide, if you may, it's also sharing a lot more in terms of how we remain aligned as a sustainable organization and ensuring that we remain as a global trusted research management organization. It's important not to only have vision and mission in place, but, core values, code of conduct, having Personal Data Protection Act and ensuring that we commit to it and, align ourselves to it. But most importantly, we even have an integrity governance unit within the organization and having anti-corruption plan drawn up so that this is also to project to our stakeholders, especially to our industry members, that we are very much committed and aligned to being a GTRMO. Now, the next slide would actually share a lot more in terms of our background, company organization structure. And this I would just run through very briefly. This is pretty much a diagram of our board of directors. And as I shared earlier, CRM is a Ministry of Health organization, and that's why often enough chairing the board of directors is always the Minister of Health of Malaysia. And you could see also the Director General of Health also within our board of directors, alongside with other key opinion leaders from the ministry, from the industry, from other sides, especially from the academia and from the private centers. All these are important, pertinent stakeholders that help advise and propel the clinical research ecosystem. And it's with these guidance that we could actually further propel the clinical research ecosystem in Malaysia. Now, within CRM, and if you look at my next slide, is talking about our organizational structure. And in CRM, we have 5 key departments, all led by our Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Akmal Yusof. And we also even have an integrity governance unit that oversees the compliance and conformance of our ISO standards within the organization. The largest department in CRM is the Clinical Operations Department, and I'll dwell a little bit further into that later on in my subsequent presentation. But as a whole in CRM, we have about 250 employees, and majority of them are actually in the Clinical Operations Department. Now I'll share a little more in my next slide in terms of CRM's function, what we actually do. And I've shared briefly in terms of how we are positioned as a one-stop center for the nation and also a site management organization. So how CRM functions is actually pretty much providing the needed advice and consult to a lot of organizations. And if you could see on the left-hand side of this diagram, it is like mainly made up of our sponsors like pharmaceutical companies, biotech, even medical device companies, and at times even contract research organizations who often enough reach out to us in CRM to understand better about the landscape of Malaysia. They may be unfamiliar about the sites that can potentially do studies, and this is where we do feasibility studies for them. We help match the right investigators that can do the study that they have in mind. We also assist in budget inquiries, legal inquiries, but most importantly for them to understand what is the overall framework of conducting a clinical research in Malaysia. There's regulatory processes in place, there's ethics processes in place. All this we help share this in an advisory step in the beginning itself so that they understand better and know what's needed when it comes to planning a clinical trial here in Malaysia. Now, over the years, if you could see on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side of this diagram, you could see actually the number of centers that has opened up in Malaysia. And as of end of 2023, we have about 250 trial sites, not only public hospitals, if you see it, but also in university hospitals, also in private hospitals as well. And our number of investigators have now grown to about 1,700 investigators. So we do the matching of investigators to the sponsors and CROs overall. We don't just look and focus on MOH centers. We also assess and ensure that our private centers and our university hospitals are also in the radar and also get the opportunity to conduct these clinical trials. Now, I would share a little more about how CRM is positioned as a site management organization. So if you see the earlier slide, it's a lot about the planning. Oh, in the beginning, I want to get information, and that's what the industry need. They need information. If I want to do trial here, how long it takes, who are the people I could work with. But when it comes to conducting the clinical trial in Malaysia itself, we are there to support the doctors at the hospitals to ensure that they have the needed resources. All they need to do is just focus on conducting the clinical trial. How we do so? Firstly, in the Ministry of Health sites, we look into the legal review. We facilitate the legal review. We facilitate in the budget negotiations. Later, when the study takes place, we actually facilitate with the budget payment as well to ensure that the study budget is being dispersed to the study team as the study activity is being carried out. But most importantly, we actually have a lineup of study coordinators. These are all CRM employees, and they are actually permanently positioned at the hospitals to support the doctors in carrying out clinical trials. So as I mentioned earlier, we have about 250 employees in CRM, but 200 of them are actually our study coordinators supporting our doctors in conducting clinical trials. We are all about ensuring studies can be delivered with speed, quality, and reliability, because this is essential and especially important when it comes to conducting clinical trials, especially global clinical trials. So this is how we provide that support as a site management organization. Now, my next slide, if you may, would share a little bit about Malaysia as a glance. So now we deep dive into the sponsored clinical trials in Malaysia. A little bit about CRM has been shared in the beginning, but let's deep dive into what's happening in Malaysia in reality. Now, Malaysia as a country, we are a population of 34 million, about 12% of the whole of Indonesia population. So a very small country, relatively, if you compare to a giant like Indonesia. A lot like Indonesia, we are also a multi-ethnic population, and just as Indonesia as well, y'all could also boast the fact that a third of the world population genomics is residing in the region, as well as in Malaysia as well. With this, there's a lot of opportunities to carry out clinical trials because we have a very heterogeneous population in this region, and there's often enough a lot of sites by the industry to expand their clinical trial population to look into new ethnic populations so that they can actually carry out or conduct and include these populations in these clinical trials. Now, my next slide would share a little bit about the burden of non-communicable disease. And why I say this is if in case you reflect back into the purpose why we're doing this at the end of the day, is to really bring in innovative therapies that could really address the unmet needs of our patients here in Malaysia. And one of those highest burdens we observe and we look at is actually the NCDs, the non-communicable disease, in which especially cancer remains one big part of it and plays a big significant part of it all. This is just to share the data of the cancer incidence in Malaysia. Sorry, going back to my earlier slide, I think we moved a little too fast. But just to share a little bit on the cancer incidence in Malaysia that, you could still see a very high number, especially in terms of breast cancer, colorectal cancer, and lung cancer as well. But not to forget, in Malaysia, a little over half of Malaysians are actually obese or overweight. And this again rises up to a lot of NCDs such as hypercholesterolemia, hypertension, heart failure, diabetes. All these are unmet needs at times because sometimes patients have exhausted at times the therapies, and hence why we need to look and explore into new clinical trial opportunities where we can bring in these innovative therapies. But that being said, there's also still a very low number of clinical trials that's being conducted here in Malaysia. And may I say, it's not only just in Malaysia, but also in the region. This is just data of back in 2020, and it's showing there's a very low trial density in Malaysia compared to other countries. And you could still see relatively countries like Thailand. Indonesia is not even in the map because it's the fact that the trial density is really that low in that sense. But it's showing there's a huge opportunity because of the fact that there is still so few trials that's happening here in this region. Collectively, 3% of global clinical trials that's happening in the world is only happening in Southeast Asia, meaning even though we contribute 8% of the world population. So there's a lot of opportunities here to bring in trials. Now, my next slide would share a little bit about the breakdown of clinical trials and how the trend we've been observing here in Malaysia alone. Because again, the topic is also lessons in Malaysia, what we've been learning, what we've been doing as well. And in Malaysia, you could see the fact that the number of clinical trials, since the inception of Clinical Research Malaysia, we've been growing exponentially since 2019 onwards. You could see the number of clinical trials have been growing. So even though COVID hit us and hit a lot of, affected a lot of the clinical trial operations, somehow or other we were able to sustain and ensure there's a continuous growth of clinical trials as well in the country. And this is through the delivery of clinical trials. This is some of the factors that industry members look at, how we can continuously deliver clinical trials with speed, quality, and reliability. But most importantly, if you see the breakdown of clinical trials, 20% of the clinical trials that's happening is indeed in the space of oncology, followed by infectious disease. This is about 13%. And about 8 to 10% are actually in the space of cardiovascular diseases. So this is where we typically see a lot of the clinical trials happening. And year by year, this is pretty much the top three therapeutic areas. But that being said, we do see other TAs, therapeutic areas like pediatrics, nephro, endocrinology. These trials also happening here in Malaysia. Now, do allow me to deep dive more into the oncology trial space. And I think my next slide would share a little more about the cancer studies that's been happening here in Malaysia. Again, if you look at the cancer studies and reflecting back into the cancer burden in Malaysia, lung cancer and breast cancer were among the top 3 cancers in Malaysia. And you could see also that being reflected in the number of studies. We don't see that many colorectal cancer studies yet. But that being said, we are also welcoming opportunities from industry members to bring in these trials whenever there's an innovative therapeutic coming in or developing. So we work very closely with a lot of the industry members, international ones like international pharmaceutical companies like Novartis, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, MSD, to see how we can explore their development pipelines and bring the therapeutics that's being developed in their pipelines to the country so that we can ensure our patients have that access, early on access, rather than waiting until the drug is being registered in another 10 years' time. So this is how we really work closely with industry members to bring in the opportunities. But most importantly, I think if you see also on the right side of the graph, you could see also the number of clinical researchers. That means oncologists that have clinical research capabilities are also growing with the number of trials. So it's not just being exhausted in the sense of just the same group of people doing clinical trials. We're also trying to grow the pool of talents here in Malaysia, not just ensuring that the same pool of people are working on the trials, but we have new sites opening, new clinical researchers who are taking up trials so that the opportunity is expanded further as well. Now, my next slide would talk a little more about, I think, the growth of sites as well in terms of, in Malaysia, how we've expanded. And you could see it's not just focused in Ministry of Health sites. We are actually also expanding in university hospitals, in also private centers as well. There's opportunities for everybody to take up clinical trial, enough said, in that sense. because this is truly mapping also the patient journey. Sometimes the patients who have access only to the first line treatment and have failed them, they have the opportunity to seek for clinical trials in a Ministry of Health setting. Sometimes if they failed or they have access to a second line treatment or a third line treatment, sometimes this is often enough happening in the private center where there's the patient can afford to pay out of pocket, or they have medical insurance, they are covered under medical insurance. So this is where the patient can have access to clinical trials as well at the private center. So this is how we are trying to grow the ecosystem, not just focusing in Ministry of Health sites alone, but also in private centers and university hospitals. And with this, we are truly growing in the ecosystem as well. Now, at the end of the day, when it comes to conducting clinical trials, it's not just bringing in numbers, but it's also ensuring that we deliver them. And this is where we look into trial recruitment data as well, and we monitor them closely, and to see how our investigators are doing or faring in light with the other sites, the other global centers that are conducting clinical trials. These are all important data, and why is it important is because industry members often look at this information to see whether is the trial center a good enough center that we can go back to and ensure that we can continuously bring in new trial opportunities. So this is where we often enough capture this data as recruitment achievements. Some of our centers in some of the studies conducted have been named top global recruiters, first recruiters, be it in the region or be it globally. And we often enough highlight this because these are important information also to showcase how well our investigators, and may I also share, most of these investigators are from MOH centers as well. And they have been really performing and excelling well in terms of global clinical trials and earning their name among their peers, among their global peers, may I say, when it comes to conducting clinical trials and delivering them. Now, slide, we'll share a little more about how we also support clinical trials. And this is truly one of the intangible benefits we've gained in terms of delivering clinical trials. We've actually created a line of profession called the the study coordinators. Now, CRM has close to about 200 study coordinators. Actually, the numbers keep growing, and this is data of about a month back. From what I hear now, we have about 205 study coordinators already. And our study coordinators are there supporting the doctors in carrying out clinical research. They are not just there as a temporary position. They are truly a permanent position of permanent employees of CRM. They are permanently placed at the centers to support the doctors. But most importantly, we have created and enabled this as a line of profession there, which they can grow and develop their career in. So it's not like a contractual position. It's one that they can actually build their career pathway on. If you see the career pathway in the infographic below, you could grow from a junior exec level to a senior to a managerial level within CRM as well. And they are all GCP certified. They have a line of supervision. They have a stable, secure job environment. And they are fully engaged in supporting the clinicians in carrying out or in supporting in the conduct of these global clinical trials. And it's through this support that the investigators also are able to take up new studies, new opportunities to conduct clinical trials, because they already have the team at the site to support them in carrying out clinical trials. So when it comes to ensuring there's good clinical practice, aligning to the investigator's role to ensure files are being kept accordingly, to ensure records are met and later on can be audited and monitored as well. All this is through the work of study coordinators. Now, if you look at my next slide, it's actually talking a little bit about challenge, but that being said, also an opportunity there as well. Now, speed is often enough one of the main areas of concern and one of the main focus areas for a lot of industry members when it comes to carrying out clinical trials. They often enough map a country's speed in carrying out a clinical trial, and this is where it's essential for us to remain competitive with the region, with other countries, and remain ahead in ensuring clinical trials can be carried out or can be started. In this sense, this is the startup timeline, can be started as fast as possible. Often enough, some countries have a parallel review pathway system, but this is where it's important to benchmark countries and our position as well in terms of our startup timeline so that we can meet and ensure we have a good timeline in the region when it comes to starting up a clinical trial, because this is often enough one of the big parameters that a lot of stakeholders and industry members look at when they want to consider a country when it comes to carrying out clinical trials. Now, in Malaysia, if you look at my next slide, we'll talk a little more about how Malaysia has been doing in terms of startup timelines. And this is just diving into some essential areas, mainly the ethics committee review, where now reviews can be done within 32 calendar days. And also looking into the legal review, which is the clinical trial agreement review. Often enough, there needs to be a contract between the investigator and the industry member when it comes to carrying out a clinical trial. And even the clinical trial agreement review has shortened tremendously to now being 14 calendar days when it comes to reviewing a clinical trial agreement. So this is how we ensure and facilitate that startup so that we address that challenge and to keep ourselves aligned to that competitive timeline in the region as well. Now, my next slide, if you may, also is talking about another opportunity here. And this is one that we've looked at based on the trend of studies that we've been observing in Malaysia. Now, before 2016, when we've been observing the trend of studies, majority of the studies have always been in the space of phase 3 and phase 2. And we recognize the need to actually bring forth early phase studies into Malaysia. Why? Firstly, is the fact that we want to grow our own early phase capabilities so that our own investigators and researchers later, when they want to even do IIR studies, they already have the early phase capabilities to even carry out a first-in-human study here in Malaysia. So this is where CRM has actually also put in a lot of resources to set up the phase 1 realization project. This was initiated back in 2016, and we saw the development of guidelines, training our investigator, training our regulatory officer, so that they are comfortable and they can also carry out and conduct first-in-human studies. Since the P1RP, which is the phase 1 realization project, since it has ended back in 2021, we actually had 2 sites that's been recognized under the phase 1 program under NPRA, which is our regulatory authority. And since then, since the phase 1 realization project has ended, we have actually decided to continue it under P1RP 2.0. This time looking into investing into capability development more, that is training and developing, again, not only our regulatory officers and investigators, but also our study coordinators, so that they are also equipped with the skills and knowledge when it comes to facilitating the investigators in carrying out early phase studies. Now, earlier, if you recall me mentioning, we have 2 first-in-human accredited sites in Malaysia. And why is this important? Is because these 2 first-in-human sites are now already actively conducting first-in-human studies. Now, before this time period, we've not had a first-in-human study in Malaysia, especially of a pharmaceutical product. But now we've had at least 5 first-in-human studies, but collectively 12 phase 1 studies already in Malaysia that's taken place. So with this progress in place, it's really helping in terms of boosting Malaysia's capabilities in early phase. And now we are trying to also position ourselves more attractively to see how we can compete further in ensuring we can bring in more early phase studies as well. Just to share, some of these early phase studies have also got our investigators being recognized for their contribution in these global studies. In fact, one of our investigators was later on named as the co-author in the Triple Conference Global Meeting that happened last year in Boston, in which he was named as the co-author in the presentation that was presented as a late-breaking abstract then. So sometimes even when it comes to conducting sponsored clinical trials, I do wish to also highlight to you, and it may not be also mentioned in the slide, but also often enough, a lot of these investigators do get opportunities to present their data as co-authors, be it in publications, be it in presentations in conferences, and they get to network and engage with a lot of their global peers in these global studies as well. So this is just some of the hidden opportunities that often enough arise when it comes to conducting global clinical trials. But early phase also enables and pushes this further so that we can really compete and encapsulate the ecosystem from phase 1 right up to the later phase as well. Now, what's next in Malaysia? And we've already talked a lot more in terms of what's been happening all this while. But we are also looking further to see how we can further position Malaysia better. One is to be the preferred hub for clinical research in the region. But that being said, how we can do this and drive this is remaining aligned as a global trusted research management organization is essential, is important. How we can ensure and continuously deliver trials with speed, quality, and reliability. But we're also trying to grow the clinical research profession pool here in Malaysia. We've spoken about the 200 study coordinators that we have. But to date, in the clinical research profession pool in Malaysia has grown now to about 2,700 clinical research professions. This is not just including CRM study coordinators, it includes the investigators, it includes the CRAs, that comes from the industry members, from the CROs. And with more industry members setting up their base and expanding their pool of talent here in Malaysia, it creates more opportunities for carrying out clinical trials as well in the country. But we're also looking into digitalizing our processes so that we remain and ensure high efficiency and throughput as a site management organization as well. Now, we have also targets in place. I think this is just to share with you some of the targets we have in mind, which we hope to and aim to achieve by the end of 2033. Amongst it, if you could see, it's also the clinical research profession to drive this up, the numbers up from 2007 that we have it present to 4,000 clinical research professions. One of those initiatives we're doing is also having a center of excellence. We have a center of excellence in place where we are trying to also, where we offer foundation programs for fresh graduates who wish to initiate their career in clinical research. So this foundation program is a 3-month program that we provide for our fresh graduates so that they actually undergo this 1 month of theory and 2 months of practical. That's the trainee session, industrial trainee session, so that they are later on, once they've graduated, they are ready to take up a role as a study coordinator in any of the centers. We also want to grow the number of clinical trials in Malaysia to 3,500. Currently, we have about 2,300 from 20, as I shared earlier, the numbers 2,300 from 2012 to 2023. But 3,500, this is from 2023 to 2033 cumulatively. So this is how we want to see how we can grow the numbers. But also going back to our early phase initiative, we want to also ensure there's at least 80 early phase studies that's taken place in the country as well. Now, this is just where we are looking at in Malaysia. But what's the opportunity for us here in the region? Now, this is a report that's been shared by IQVIA, published by IQVIA just a couple months back, and it talks about patient availability and country readiness when it comes to conducting clinical trials, and how Malaysia and Indonesia is in fact ranked. Okay, if you don't mind, I repeat back again. This is showing how Malaysia and Indonesia is ranked among the top 30 in terms of country readiness when it comes to carrying out clinical trials. And this is looking into the patient availability, the existing infrastructure in the country, be it operational and clinical infrastructure. So this is truly a proud thing to see. If you see other Southeast Asian countries, it's only these 2 countries that's being named among the top 30. You also have countries like Thailand, Vietnam, that's also named a little later. Singapore is also there, but it's a little behind the score in terms of, because of the patient availability score is very low. But this is also to share the opportunities, the hidden opportunities for Indonesia when it comes to carrying out clinical trials. A lot of industry members have already mapped you in terms of carrying out clinical trials, a high potential. And this is where we really look into opportunities to work together collaboratively to see how we can grow the region. One of those initiatives that we've been doing in Malaysia, and if you could go to the next slide, is also putting up this as an ASEAN agenda, how we can drive this as a regional prosperity industry-sponsored clinical trials. So we put this as a concept paper through ASEAN, and we've got this endorsed by the ASEAN Health Cluster, and we are driving this as an initiative, working closely with the regional stakeholders to see how we can grow the percentage. Currently, as I shared, it's only 3% of global clinical trials happening here in Malaysia. How we can double up these numbers so that we can work together and make this region more attractive, be it whether we need to do policy reforms, regulatory reforms to really enable this to happen as well. With this in place also, I would like to also take the opportunity to invite all of you for our CRM Trial Connect conference, which is happening, if you look at my next slide, which is happening next year. And this is actually, we've been doing this 3 years in the running, and next year will be the 4th conference we are organizing already. It's touted to be the largest clinical research conference because we had about 1,000 attendees this year, and from different countries, attendees from different countries, and collaborators from different organizations. But this year, for next year, we're actually organizing this between 8th to 9th of May. And we're actually doing a pre-conference program as well. So a lot of workshops will be conducted during the 6th to 7th of May. Stay tuned with CRM's website. We'll be sharing a lot more information. Definitely, I'll be sharing this also with Ibu Indri once we have further developments. And do really welcome all of you to join us there, because I think it's a good opportunity for us to really grow together, to learn from other investigators, other clinicians, other stakeholders, what's happening, what are the new opportunities, and we can really work collaboratively, in terms of growing that clinical research ecosystem together as well. So with this, I'd like to end my presentation today. And yeah, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, if there's any questions, do feel free to drop it in as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Asha. That was a very insightful sharing from you. So I think we can see that Malaysia is quite advanced, but as the report that stated by Asha, that is published by IQVIA, that we, Indonesia, we also have the potential to be a site of clinical trials because we have a quite high number of patients availability scores. So, okay, so I think I will give the floor, the opportunity to ask. So please ask a question. You can raise your hand, or you can just post it in the chat box. With Indonesian is fine. So, okay, while we're waiting, so Asha, based on your experience, I think like Malaysia is quite success now in maximizing the opportunities for the sponsored clinical trials, right? And how can we as Indonesian, I mean, as you know that we are 7 times bigger than you, for the populations, and currently we also have like several, I think, activities that is focuses on the population of Indonesia, and how we can implement it. I mean, like, what are the strategies that you think we have in similar to attract more sponsored clinical trials to Indonesia?
So I think this goes back again to our value proposition. I think diversity, all of us have already as a region. We offer diversity as a region collectively. But I think going back to our value proposition, speed, quality, and reliability, how we can ensure that trials can be delivered or can be started in a speedy manner, that's important to look at. Quality is providing the quality data. This is why we have the study coordinator set up. So how we can ensure providing quality data in clinical trials, keeping up to the quality, because at the end of the day, the quality data is essential when it comes to stakeholders coming back and reinvesting back in Malaysia. But reliability is also ensuring that we continuously deliver trials, especially meeting the recruitment targets, and ensuring that we keep up to whatever measures that they have in place. So it's these 3 components that's essential to us in that sense. And I think it's, if in case Indonesia also keeps up or, looks into these 3 components, I think it would definitely be a huge pulling factor. In terms of being one of the biggest countries in the region in delivering clinical trials.
Thank you for your questions. I think, yes, so we are on the way to that. Okay, so Asha, I can see that we have 2 participants that have a question. So the first one, please, Dr. Ahmad Yanwar from RSCM, you can give the questions to Asha.
Thank you, Mrs. Moderator. I would like to ask Ms. Asha, thank you very much for your nice presentations. So for CRM, I would like to know which part is taken by the CRM and which part is taken by the site for the CTA. So which is it publication or data sharing? Which part is taken by the CRM to decide, and which part is taken by the site or the hospital to be decide or to be taken? So
So the clinical trial agreement actually talks all about that, that mention that you mentioned earlier, you know, in terms of publication, whatever that's covered under clinical trial, talking about publication opportunities and all, it will be mentioned in the clinical trial agreement itself. So usually the clinical trial agreement encompasses all of this. And if in case, not just to also put it on, be transparent as well, doesn't mean when it comes to being involved in industry-sponsored clinical trial that the investigator would readily be having that publication opportunity. Because for the investigator to have a publication opportunity, they would need to be excelling very well ahead of all the global centers, delivering good recruitment numbers, providing good data, you know, quality data in delivering really well in these global trials for them to be picked up as, you know, one of the authors in these publications. So in the clinical trial agreement that's reviewed, CRM reviews the clinical trial agreement on behalf of all the Ministry of Health sites. So this really speeds up that and, you know, makes it aligns that quickly. But the publication component is mentioned under the clinical trial agreement itself. We do not have separate agreements for it, no, in that sense. There's just this one clinical trial agreement. Everything is encompassed in that. But that being said, you know, it needs to be mentioned there that it needs to be aligned with the good clinical practice. All the factors are being mentioned there. But do wish to, as I shared earlier, in terms of publication, we don't make it or enforce it such that, oh, the investigator needs to have a publication when they are involved in industry-sponsored trial, because we can't enforce that to the industry members, to the sponsors, or to the CROs. If our industry members do well, I mean, if our investigators do well, perform well, the industry members would automatically reach out to our investigators to be for them to be named as the co-authors or authors in these publications.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Yanwar, I'm afraid I can only give you one question because we still have two others, but I think you can just type on the chat box, and Asha, please, because we have a limited time, so you can answer them by chat, type on the chat for those questions. I think you have lots of questions. So I will give to Ibu Ida Paulina from the CRO Prodia. So please, Ibu Ida.
Yes, thank you, Bu Indri. Hi, Asha. Very interesting presentation. Clinical trial in Malaysia have developed very rapidly, and the number of clinical trial in collaboration with industry is fairly large. I have a question. The first, can you share the biggest challenge in implementing clinical trial in Malaysia, and how Malaysia's strategy to get a lot of cooperation with industry? The second question, regarding the investigator-initiated trial, which also developed in Malaysia. What the role of CRM in coordinating investigator-initiated trial? Where does the funding for the IIT clinical trial come from? And is it and does CRM also have funding for the IIT? I mean, coordination with sponsors to find the funding for IIT. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ibu Indah. But okay, just to also add further clarity as well, and I think also later the subsequent speaker, Dr. Saiful, will be sharing a lot more about the IIT perspective here in Malaysia. But I'll just be very quick because my battery is also running. But IIT is not managed by CRMs. IIT is typically managed by our sister institute, the Institute for Clinical Research, which I will leave Dr. Saiful to share. In terms of some of the challenges that we foresee, or what we've experienced, is also in terms of making sure.
Sepertinya Asya terlempar ya.
Iya, Asya terlempar sepertinya. Ya, tadi dia bilang running out of battery ya. Oke, so probably I think mungkin Bapak Ibu bisa mengetik saja di chat ya untuk pertanyaannya, karena kita juga sudah limited waktu. So thank you for the questions. So I think we will move to the second session. So our second speaker is Dr. Saiful Safwan Mdesani. So he will be presenting about the building a robust investigator-initiated trial ecosystem in Cyprus, Malaysia. So he is a clinical researcher specializing in dengue, clinical trial methodology, and capacity building. He leads the clinical research centers at Hospital of Kuala Lumpur and has held key roles at Malaysia National Institute of Health He is also active in global initiatives like the Dengue Alliance and Aro Alliance for Asia, ASEAN and East Asia. His work in capacity building include participation in WHO expert consultations and representation at the WHO Global Forum on Clinical Trials, highlighting his dedicating to advancing clinical research in Malaysia and the Western Pacific. So let's welcome our second speaker, Dr. Saiful Safwan, to share his insights. So the floor is yours, Dr. Saiful.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, Madam Indri. Can you all hear me well? I hope so.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Right. First, I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to speak, inviting me to speak on this platform. So I bid you Assalamualaikum and a very good morning from Malaysia. Now, I think the key in terms of my presentation here is number one, about the investigator-initiated trial, which is different from industry-sponsored research or trials. And the question in terms of what I will deliver is how are we going to build a robust IIT ecosystem? And I'll be sharing the insights from Malaysia. Next, please. So these are the outlines of my discussion for today. I'll introduce the role of our Institute for Clinical Research, its role in IIT, what is the current ecosystem of IIT in Malaysia. I'll share you some case studies, a couple of case studies. And what I like to offer is some guide probably for our Indonesian colleagues in terms of how to build IIT and what's the future holds in the realm of IIT. Next, please. So, next, please. So, so we are now transitioning. We've discussed from Ms. Asha about ISR, industry-sponsored research or trials, to IIT. Now, it's very clear that in ISR, the protocol is developed by the industry. It is majority, I would say, almost all ISR are about commercial drug development. IIT is different for two reasons. Number one, it is designed by independent investigators themselves. And usually the reason for having that research or trial is because of an academic and scientific interest. Next, please. So it's very important. And we see in Malaysia, there's 4 reasons why IIT is important apart from having ISR. Number one, we have got to fill research gaps. There are questions that that needs to be answered that cannot be answered during drug development. It occurs later, or it is completely a different aspects in terms of drugs. Maybe about reducing the dose of the usual drugs, maybe in a different indication. So which are probably not the priority for the pharmaceutical industry. Number 2, promoting scientific excellence, because this is the chance whereby you've got young investigators to actually spearhead the trial. And number 3 is all about strengthening the healthcare systems. Imagine that you've got now some avenue for patients to explore new indications, newer doses, and when we talk about lower doses of medicines, it entails to less expenditure for the Ministry of Health. And finally, a chance for capacity building. And capacity building here not just encompasses in terms of your skills, but also your resources, infrastructure, and human resources. Next. Next, please. Okay, so what is the role of ICR or Institute of Clinical Research within NIH? So NIH or National Institutes of Health in Malaysia, we have 6 institutes. We started with the eldest of our sibling in 1900s with Institute of Medical Research. And then Institute of Public Health came about. We, Institute for Clinical Research, came about back in 1998. And then other sister institutes were born. Next. So within NIH, there is ICR, or Institute for Clinical Research, and under ICR we've got many CRCs. In total, we've got a network of 37 CRCs within our Ministry of Health hospitals alone. And within ICR, there are 5 centers which focuses on certain types of research, and also the administrative and strategic unit, or what we call a Sigma. Next, please. So we've got our own vision. We are very ambitious. We like to be one of the leading research institution in Asia. And we feel that our mission is by driving patients' health outcomes, improving it through high standard research. And our tagline, research that matters to patient. Next. So we've got many functions. These are our core functions, but I like to highlight number 4. We promote, we support, and we conduct investigator-initiated researches, including investigator-initiated trials within Ministry of Health and beyond. Next. So now I like to discuss the IIT ecosystem, the current ecosystem of IIT in Malaysia. So let's start. What have we identified in ICR to be the pillars of a strong IIT ecosystem? Number 1, there must be training, there must be capacity building efforts. Number 2, there must be sustainable funding mechanism. Number 3, there must be collaboration between all key players. Number 4, there must be a supportive regulatory environment. Next, please. Okay, so the IIT ecosystem requires a collaborative network from investigators to institutions to regulatory bodies to funding agencies, and including the industry partners. Next. So investigators, for one, they must be qualified. The investigators who conducts IIT can be either from within the Ministry of Health or outside of the Ministry of Health, including private entities. Next. Institutions that are involved are quite wide, from every MOH facilities, including hospitals and our health clinics in the community, to our own research institutes, NIH, or even academic centers in Malaysia, namely the universities. Next, please. The regulatory bodies in Malaysia, there are 3 main regulatory bodies. The MREC, which vets through and gives the ethics approval to IITs. The NPRA, these are basically the police of any trials, be it ISR or IIT in Malaysia. And finally, the Medical Device Authority. Next, please. There are funding agencies that are funding IITs currently. Most grants are coming from the Ministry of Health, called the MRG, or Ministry of Health Research Grant, which is what I am working under. And mostly the Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation, and also the Ministry of Finance. But there are also funding from state governments and other research agencies. There are private foundations. Take, for example, Cancer Research Malaysia, which is a research foundation on its own, and they are involved in one of our IIT currently. There could be institutional funds and also industry grants available. Next, please. Now, industry partners, our main industry partners, I would have to say Clinical Research Malaysia, because Clinical Research Malaysia has, since 2012, excellently spearhead ISR, help capacity build all our CRCs within Malaysia. They've played a big role in terms of their contribution, in terms of even donation of assets. And that's how close our collaboration with CRM is in the past, current, and also in the present. There are other clinical research, contract research organizations that's I think it's now 30 and counting available in Malaysia. These are clinical research organizations which offer many parts of services within the execution or conduct of a clinical trial. Pharmaceutical association and also other NGOs. Next. So what have been the ICR's initiative and support to beef up or build a robust IIT ecosystem in Malaysia? Number one is the creation of MOH Research Grant, MRG, in terms of IIT. So we've created the clinical trial hub cluster. Within, there are many clusters which I'll show you in a short while. But clinical trial hub cluster is specific grant, part of the grant that caters for IITs. Next. So in this year, in 2024, these are the many clusters. I'm showing you 10 out of 12 main or the 10 largest clusters in terms of the grant size. This year we had about more than 40 million in terms of the MOH research grant available to be used for many different projects. And as you can see, number 2 on the left-hand side, top left-hand side is the clinical trial hub. The size of the bubbles reflects the size of the grants size. Next. So there are currently 8 IITs ongoing that uses the MRG Clinical Trial Hub Cluster Fund in the year of 2023 to 2024. Now, let me take in comparison, there were back in June 2024, 88 ISR. Now, as you can imagine, you would expect even in NIH USA, they only spend 12% in terms of comparatively the size of funds in IIT as compared to ISR. So we are 8 of 88. That's about 9%. So I think we are doing not too bad in terms of our offer of funding. Next, please. So another initiative is mentorship of young investigators, especially research officers. This is crucial. Next. Training and capacity building initiatives, we've done that a lot, and many times we engage institutions abroad who are at the forefront of research, advanced ID team from the Singapore, the NUS professors in Singapore. We've been engaging them because we want to train and capacity build our manpower skills. Next. So infrastructure, you've got to have, and we've been, ICI have been building infrastructure. We've got 2 first-in-human facilities. This is one of them, the Center of Clinical Trial, which is in Hospital Ampang. Hospital Ampang is within the Greater Klang Valley, the center where Kuala Lumpur sits. So this is smack in the middle of it. Collaboration is very important as well, and collaboration meaning you've got to engage other institutions. And here the director of ICI and myself, we attended the WHO Global Clinical Trial Forum back in November last year. On the far left is actually Sir Jeremy Farah, the WHO chief scientist, and on the far right next to me is Professor Nicholas Day from Moru Mahidol Oxford Clinical Trial Unit. So next, please. So ICI has started a long time ago, back in 2000. We've started with registries. We've started with a lot of observational studies, wide cohort studies that spans across Malaysia throughout the years. And then we started back in 2016 to be involved in Storm C1 trial, which is an IIT in hepatitis C study. And then when COVID came, we were also smack in the middle of solidarity trial. Next, please. There are definitely obstacles that we had to face. Many obstacles. Securing and spending the fund is not easy. There are limited government spending as in any resources, any capacity. There's always limitation to everything, and there's always complex administrative financial procedures to navigate. It's never easy to use government funds because there are a lot of checks and balances. Number two is, yes, we've got 37 CRCs, but not all CRCs are well equipped. There are variability in terms of its existing resources, be it manpower, be it infrastructure, and other equipment and resources. Next. Navigating the regulatory processes. We've pretty much streamlined the regulatory processes, but again, well, we feel there are still complexities that needs to be ironed out, and we have to remember that ISA is different in terms of its pathway, somewhat different from IIT is somewhat different from ISA. Next, please. Sustaining the funding, maintaining equipments, maintaining your human resources is a challenge. What about research experience? Because a lot of us, many of us, physicians, doctors, you are trained in clinical, but we are never really properly trained, adequately trained in research. So that is a challenge in terms of formulating training, because training also comes with a lot of cost. Next. And finally, time.
I'm sorry, Doctor, I think you have been mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
yeah,
please
okay.
continue.
Yeah, okay. So how do we overcome our obstacles? Capacity building initiatives. We've done a lot of capacity building initiatives. We have continued to explore more avenues to have more capacity building initiatives, workshops, and more and training modules. And next. And I've got to say, we've been engaging our stakeholders. I've touched on about the many stakeholders that are involved in the networking to run an IIT. So we've been engaging stakeholders, multiple discussion for just even a single project. It's always an ongoing process. Next, please. We are always in the effort of streamlining our regulatory processes. We've got our National Medical Research Registry. We've got our own GCP. We constantly update our GCP. We've got our own National Committee for Clinical Research that sits to coordinate and promote clinical research throughout Malaysia. And as Ms. Asha has mentioned, next year there's a clinical CRM Trial Connect that is part of the effort of the National Committee for Clinical Research as well. And soon we will also launch a guideline for conducting investigator-initiated trials using the Clinical Trial Hub Cluster Fund, so that people will see how to use those funds. So these are our streamlining efforts. Next. Next, please. So two studies like I like to share. Number one is the ITEC study. So this is basically an IIT that we run to show that ivermectin that became a hype in COVID. So we've showed that we shouldn't be using ivermectin. So we help the public a lot. We help policymakers so that we don't have to spend money buying unnecessary drugs or treatment. Next. So the next important or seminal trial that we had was the EAST study. In fact, our DG, Director General of Health, was directly involved in this study. So in this study in hepatitis C trial or treatment, we showed that 12 weeks of treatment with antivirals is equivalent with 8 weeks, a shorter duration of treatment. So what does it mean to policymakers? What does it mean to government? So what is the impact? The impact is financial. The government can save a lot of costs and divert those costs to build capacity, build the ministry and the nation's health more effectively. Next. So whilst doing these trials, we've managed to develop our research capacity by having a shorter duration. We've therefore directly increased access to treatment, and we've used methods or technologies which never been in real practice before in this trial to promote the use of this technology. Next. So what would be my our suggestion to help you guys think about how to launch a successful IIT ecosystem? Number one, you have got to have a strong institutional government support. You have to, whilst you are doing it, you have to make sure that quality and compliance to and your monitoring standards are of high quality. You've got to navigate the funding landscape so as to make sure that funding is sustainable, and the most important at the start is building a good research team and always collaborate. Next. So if you ask me, so what are the people, who are the stakeholders involved? Definitely investigators, you've got to engage. Institutions, you've got to engage, whether it's the funding agencies, whether the academic that provides training. You've got to engage policymakers, because you've got to convince policymakers that funding investigator-initiated trials is beneficial for the government, for the policy of the government. And you've got to engage the industry partners, because of your limited resources, you need help. Next. So there are emerging research areas, I think, in Malaysia and across Southeast Asia. We think precision medicine is one, environmental health and climate change is the second. AI, machine learning, and digital health is big, and also mental health and well-being. Next, please. So, and it's not just about investigating into those fields, but there are also technology that can be integrated in IIT to smoothen, to make IIT more efficient. Electronic data capture, wearable devices, AI-powered tools for data analysis, open software, mobile health apps. These are a few examples that we can use in IIT in its conduct. Next. Next, please. So I think we can collaborate, both Malaysia, Indonesia. Number one, we've got similar healthcare system, very, very much similar. Our challenges are also similar. Next. Our health concerns, our health priorities are similar as well. We share very similar infectious diseases. We share, of course, similar non-communicable diseases as well. And our maternal and child health are also at the same level as well. Next. And it's an opportunity where if we collaborate, we can share our resources, our expertise, our patients to increase our impact. And take, for example, the recovery trial, the seminal recovery trial in in the UK that span across the UK. So it is touted as the best by WHO, the best adaptive trials ever done, and no one could do it but UK health system. And the main core ingredient for that trial is because they collaborate throughout their nation. Next. So there are potential areas for in collaborative research. We could share research projects. We could share our knowledge. We could develop some exchange training programs, mentorship programs we can develop together. Next. So I think to quote a very prominent person who basically spearhead the development of the automotive industry, Henry Ford. So I think the key ingredient working together to develop success is cannot be overemphasized. Next. So you can visit our website at icr.nih.gov.my. This is how we can be contacted. So I think that's it. I hope I've been clear enough. I like to take questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saiful. I think we can give a big applause for Dr. Saiful. I think from your insight, it's very clear that we need to have a very robust research team, as well as the networking and collaboration is the key for success. And I think I have one question before I can go to the floor, that in your presentation, you say that the challenges is the balanced research activity between patient care core duties, which is, I think I fully agree with you. So how in Malaysia you try to solve these problems, like to convince the clinicians that they can do also research, but they still can do their patient care duties?
Okay. So the underlying core ingredient must be the interest of that individual to be involved in research. That cannot be overemphasized. The interest is paramount because there are a lot of challenges. Like there are other challenges: securing funding. You've got to defend your project when you put in your proposals. So it requires a certain mettle to be brave enough to dive into the research world. But there are government mechanisms. For example, specialists who wants to be involved can actually take a 1 day, what we call a flexi timing. So they can dedicate 1 day within the 5-day working week to solely do research. That is possible, right? But we have non-specialists in our manpower among doctors. There are medical officers. So medical officers, I would say 99% of their time are engaged with clinical core duties. So how do we go about handling those? We actually select a few individuals or candidates to be posted in each of our clinical research centers. So we open up posts that is available under ICR or NIH, and they therefore will be completely associated or work with in the research completely, or they'll be based in the hospital, but they are based in CRC, whereby their work is protected. So we don't have many. We have challenges in terms of the number of the medical officers that we have in each and every of our CRCs. Even, there's always inadequate staffing. But I think promoting the successes of researchers and one way to promote is just to inform them and highlight to them how they can develop themselves in research. Sorry, I'm not getting any audio here.
Can you hear me well now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So thank you for your answer. So I will give the floor to ask questions. So please raise your hands. I don't see any raised hands, so I think I will go to the chat. I think there are several questions. So this is from Dr. Reza from Clinical Trial Research Center at Brain. Oh, okay, he's offering to have a potential collaborations.
Yep, that's
And
excellent.
then,
I'll take it up.
Yes, okay, and from Bapak Dani Gozali, would you like to share experience how ICR reconciles between sponsor budget, deadline expectation, and principal investigators' interests?
So that is on about sponsors budget, deadline expectation, and principal investigators' interest. Okay, within IIT, when we fund, basically ICR, the Clinical Trial Hub Cluster Fund, since I'm the head, I also automatically become the funder or the sponsor of the projects that uses the funds. So we've got to make sure that number one, there must be impact to the government, impact in terms of policy. So policy, for example, if like, for example, in the East study that I highlighted, a 12 weeks treatment went to in 8 weeks. So you cut down the amount of basically expenditure by at least by 1/3. Now that is impact for the government. So we want to have this sort of impact when we are funding, because this is the government's money. So we want to have clear impact on policy. So when we get projects, we need to make sure that the interest of the PI aligns with the objectives of the cluster fund.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Saiful. And then the second one is from Pak Martua Rijal. So basically, how the strategy to promote stronger collaborations between your institution with the industry, sponsor, regulator to improve regulatory process, funding, and ethical oversight.
Okay, I think to be brief and concise, there must be trust. There must be trust. Every party must share what are their priorities. And what are their objectives and goals, and make sure that every parties align with each other. Then the collaboration it becomes cohesive, and you can drive IIT forwards.
Okay, and the last questions from Bapak Komang from Atmajaya. So you mentioned on your slides about the recommendation for investigators is risk-taking. This is very interesting and quite similar with our situations here in Indonesia. So what are your tips for such cases?
Okay, by risk-taking, we mean number one, when you drive IIT, you are exploring that unmet needs, those research gaps which are not addressed by ISR and drug development. So many things can happen. You, at the end of the day, you can get sued by patient if something goes wrong. So so there's always a risk for every parties, the principal investigators, the funders, the CROs. So everyone is involved. So trial insurance, we make it a must when there's a high risk interventional trials.
Okay. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Saiful. I think it's very interesting for what you present, and as Indonesia and Malaysia is neighbors, and I think we facing the same problems. And I think with this webinar, we are hoping that we can have more collaboration, especially for capacity building, as I can see that because the Malaysia is already have like the curriculum for the GCP that is certified, those kind of things. So we are looking forward for our future collaboration. So thank you, Dr. Saiful. And then we will go to our last speaker today is Dr. Ami Prawira. So she will be presenting on navigating dual roles experience from conducting both sponsored and investigator-initiated trials. So Dr. Amy is Indonesian, so she is a diaspora that living in Australia. So he's a head of cancer trials and research unit at Prince of Wales Hospitals in Sydney, Australia, and served as a chief medical officer at Obatica. And she has extensive experience leading clinical research unit in hospitals across Australia and Canada, and has been involved in global studies of clinical trials. Her team received the Outstanding Cancer Clinical Trials Unit Award at the NSW Premiers Awards in 2018. She is also the principal investigator for several cancer-focused clinical trials, particularly in phase 1 and phase 3 study. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ami Prawira to share her experience. So please, Dr. Amy.
Terima kasih Bu Indri. Selamat pagi semua. Senang sekali bisa ada di sini pagi ini. Terima kasih dan bangga sekali ya untuk mendengar Inasiarsi ini. Terima kasih Bapak Budi Gunadi Sadikin, Menteri Menkes, untuk tim Inasiarsi yang penyelenggara webinar, Dr. Asar Jaya, Ibu Indri, Ibu Dona, Ibu Hanifah, dan seluruh tim Inasiarsi. Topik kita yang terakhir pagi ini yaitu navigating dual roles, experiences dari gimana kalau bisa melaksanakan dua-duanya IST dan IIT. Sebentar saya ganti. Saya lagi ditanya lagi ngomong bahasa apa, tapi nggak ada bahasa Indonesia. Jadi, oke. Kenapa kita jalankan clinical trial? Saya sangat setuju sama Dr. Saiful yang dibilang research that matters to patients. Sebagai background kan saya medical oncologist, jadi saya senang dengan clinical trial yang bisa mengadakan making drugs available and accessible to patients. Jadi kita bisa lihat hasil-hasil seperti ini. Pasien ini kansernya advance, sudah nggak ada treatment option lagi, masuk clinical trial dan tumornya hilang. Next slide, please. Ya. Tumornya hilang dan setelah clinical trialnya komplit pun dia tidak perlu treatment lagi. Jadi yang seperti ini yang benar-benar heartening ya. Kita, we're here for a reason. Why we do clinical trials. Selanjutnya. Ya, seperti yang tadi Asha cerita tentang industry sponsored trials, yang Dr. Saiful cerita tentang IIT, broadly definition cuman admin aja. Kalau IIT itu biasanya seperti yang Dr. Saiful bilang, di fundingnya dari grant, NGO, government, dan private. Kalau IIST itu di fundingnya dari industri, commercial, pharmaceutical, biotech companies. Memang kalau IIT itu kita lebih pure ya, karena kita kan nggak ada commercial goals. Kalau IST itu memang driven by commercial goals, karena mereka harus menjawab dan bertanggung jawab ke funding bodies mereka sendiri, investornya, dan sebagainya. Tapi sebenarnya hasil akhir, tujuan akhirnya itu sama, bahwa kita ada di sini untuk improve patient outcomes. Kenapa? Karena kalau satu obat atau satu clinical trial itu tidak improve patient outcomes, itu juga tidak akan ada hasil komersilnya. Jadi semua tujuannya tetap sama. Kita di sini untuk improve clinical practice, improve patient outcomes. Cuman kendalanya memang beda. Kalau IIT kan jelas ada funding dan resource limitations. Kalau industry sponsored trials biasanya fundingnya lebih baik, resource juga hasilnya lebih banyak. Selanjutnya. Ya, jadi saya cuma sekadar sharing gimana hidup di dua dunia ini. Sedikit cerita jalan yang saya selama ini ya, karir saya agak-agak belok-belok gitu. Slide selanjutnya. Ya, saya kuliah di Australia, lulus spesialis juga di Australia. Lalu saya pergi ke Princess Margaret Cancer Center untuk clinical fellowship. Saya chief fellow untuk drug development program. Mereka punya phase 1 clinical trials unit di sana. Lalu saya kembali ke Australia untuk build dan lead the precision medicine unit di Kinghorn Cancer Center. Kinghorn Cancer Center ini di Sydney. dia afiliasinya ke Garvan Institute untuk Scientific Research dan St. Vincent's Hospital untuk rumah sakitnya. Udah gitu saya pergi ke industri sebentar, tapi kangen sama pasien, terus kembali sekarang ke Prince of Wales. Saya sekarang kepala Cancer Trials and Research Unit. I look after phases 1 to 4 clinical trials, solid tumors, anything other than hematology essentially. Di samping daripada itu, saya juga Chief Medical Officer di Obatika. Jadi Obatika itu kayak consultancy service ya. Kita banyakkan terlibat dalam medical safety, medical writing, protocol writing, IB development, dan juga kita banyak involved di clinical strategy. Sebagai clinical akademis, semua teman-teman juga yang di industri, yang di masih 100% akademis atau yang setengah-setengah, tetap jiwanya sama. Jiwanya itu kita mau improve patient care gitu, dan kita mau contribute untuk evidence-based clinical practice, dan kita mau lakukan semua ini dengan integritas yang tinggi. Selanjutnya. Kenapa clinical trial? Ya, seperti tadi, karena clinical trial itu membantu pengadaan obat, making drugs available. Dan untuk pasien kita yang duduk di depan kita di klinik, kita making drugs accessible. Karena kadang obatnya itu belum ada di negara ini, atau obatnya ada di negara ini, tapi harganya nggak terjangkau. Belum, kalau di Australia mungkin belum di cover Medicare gitu. Jadi untuk pasien itu hasilnya nyata. Dan kalau kita do industry sponsored trials, IST, itu juga membawa funding untuk institusi kita. Dan itu nantinya membantu mengembangkan healthcare infrastructure, membantu clinical delivery system juga. Jadi benefitnya untuk pasien nyata, dan untuk kita tujuan kita kan sebagai clinical academic itu selalu untuk memberikan satu clinical impact. Selanjutnya. Ya, broadly aja karena tadi juga sudah dibahas ya. IIT itu secara general ada dua jenis, interventional yaitu yang melibatkan obat, atau yang non-interventional. Non-interventional itu melibatkan data biasanya dari satu institusi atau multiple institusi bergabung supaya datanya lebih banyak. Kalau yang interventional ini sebenarnya sangat sulit untuk 100% terlepas dari industri. Kenapa? Karena akademik nggak punya obat. Jadi kita perlu kolaborasi. Dan kolaborasinya itu dalam satu spektrum. Ada yang seperti Dr. Saiful bilang tadi, kayaknya mereka supply obatnya. Ada yang supply obat dan funding juga. Fundingnya ini bisa untuk menjalankan clinical trial dan bisa juga untuk institusi riset untuk do the translational scientific research behind it. Dan fundingnya juga ada spektrum, ada yang sedikit, ada yang medium, ada yang full gitu. Tapi kendalanya tetap sama, bahwa akses ke obat susah, funding lebih berkurang, dan resources juga kurang ya, karena ya kita semua kan masih ada klinik, masih sibuk lihat pasien, jadi kendalanya nyata. Tapi IIT itu memang penting karena sudah banyak ceritanya seperti yang tadi Dr. Saiful kasih contoh, dan terutama di bidang onkologi banyak IIT itu yang benar-benar groundbreaking, they change the way we treat patients. Tapi biasanya IIT yang seperti ini adalah kolaborasi antara international cancer trial groups yang besar. Jadi mereka biasanya bisa generate funding yang lebih besar, trial datanya dari pasien yang lebih banyak, dan bisa lebih efisien dibandingin IIT yang lebih kecil-kecil. Selanjutnya. Terima kasih. Jadi kalau industri clinical trial, industry involvement ini memang udah masalahnya itu sudah umum. Kita sebagai clinical academic pasti udah tahu kan masalahnya tentang industry trials. Pasien juga tahu. Dan banyak badan pemerintahan juga udah tahu bahwa kalau studi yang industry funded ini sebagian besar konklusinya itu favoring the sponsor, 89%. Kalau non-randomized study yang industry funded malah lebih parah lagi, hampir 100%, 97,8% favoring the sponsor. Dan biasanya memang ada kendalanya ya, karena kalau studi yang hasilnya negatif suka nggak dipublish gitu, atau jurnalnya juga nggak mau terima, jadi agak-agak ya mungkin ada kendala itu sedikit. Kalau kita minta data atau studi protokolnya atau statistical plan-nya ada apa enggak, sebagian besar bilang boleh kalau diminta, tapi yang benar-benar dipublikasi hanya 2,7% saja. Tapi yang 2,7% ini juga ada kendalanya karena kalau jurnal kadang-kadang memang nggak mau banyak-banyak number of pages, jadi mereka juga nggak bisa publikasi gitu. Ya, selanjutnya. Ya, secara realita sangat sulit untuk kita kalau kita mau develop drug, kita mau improve patient care, kita mau pasien kita punya obat yang paling mutakhir itu sulit untuk terpisah dari industri. Contohnya US FDA, which is BPOM-nya Amerika Serikat ya. Di tahun 2023 mereka approve 55 obat baru. 100% adalah dari name pharmaceutical sponsors, jadi ada involvement dari industri di sana pastinya. Ini saya yang di sebelah kanan, saya ambil dari paper yang ditulis dari tentang pasien with advanced genitourinary cancers dari 4 negara. Mereka perbandingkan IIT dan IST dari Kanada, Amerika Serikat, UK, dan France. Memang sebagian besar IIT itu tadinya lebih kecil, fase 2, kira-kira 20-49 pasien. IST karena fundingnya lebih banyak, juga lebih besar tadinya. Dan sebenarnya kalau yang sponsor itu lebih chance-nya adalah lebih besar untuk mereka masuk maju ke publikasi. Dan kemungkinan ya karena berbagai hal, terutama research dan funding ya, mereka mungkin kemungkinan besar akan bisa complete the study. Dan setelah studinya complete, mereka juga punya dana dan punya resource untuk analyze. Udah analisis, nanti juga punya dana dan resource untuk tulis dan publish. Jadi memang ada gap yang cukup besar antara IIT dan IST. Selanjutnya. Ya, jadi apa kewajiban kita, role kita sebagai the astute clinical investigator? Seringan kita mulai di tengah clinical. Kalau kita ditawarkan sponsor trial, dikasih protokol, kita kan nggak akan langsung bilang ya, kita nggak akan bilang ya ke semuanya, and we shouldn't. Kenapa? Kita mesti lihat apakah clinical trial protokol itu cocok untuk pasien kita. Apakah dibutuhkan dalam kelompok pasien yang kita lihat. Udah gitu, kita dig deeper, lihat scientificnya, do we believe their science gitu. Mereka papernya dipublish di mana, di Nature atau di jurnal yang nggak ada indeksnya gitu loh. Dan secara klinis, apakah ini benar-benar area yang dibutuhkan akan membuat clinical impact? Kalau iya, kita say yes dan kita lanjutkan lagi, kita gali lebih dalam lagi, kita submit untuk regulatory submission secara etika, secara kode etis, secara institusi, apakah bisa dijalankan? Lalu kita maju. Dan selama penjalanan clinical trial itu, kewajiban kita adalah menjalankan dengan integritas. Biasanya dalam perjalanan clinical trial itu pasti ada sering sekali ada interim data analysis. Jadi dan nanti di sana ya sebagian besar kita akan di-involve. Kalau kita enroll pasien, kita punya pengalaman di sana, kita akan ditanya juga gimana interpretasi data ini, apakah kita setuju. Kalau kita tidak setuju, kita wajib untuk bilang ke mereka, oh ini kok kalian kayaknya terlalu pro sponsor, atau ini mestinya agak biar balance sedikit gitu loh. Dan nanti strategi untuk publikasi ke conference yang mana, ke paper yang mana gitu. Dan di penghujung studi, pada saat studi itu complete, nanti kan data interpretation juga kita involve. Mungkin dikerjakan dari industri, tapi kita tetap lihat hasilnya dan kita lihat setuju atau tidak. Konklusinya juga kita harus dan wajib untuk bilang, ini kayaknya kok nggak balance ya, gitu. Nanti publikasinya juga sama seperti sebelumnya. Biasanya seiring perkembangan partnership di clinical study itu nanti seringan kita akan di-involve lebih early lagi in the preclinical. Sebelum mereka circulate finalize the protocol, kadang-kadang mulai di-involve kita tadi desainnya gimana. Endpoint dari clinical trial itu apakah clinically relevant? Dan nanti protokolnya sendiri apakah punya cukup safety management? Statistical analysis plan-nya make sense atau enggak gitu. Jadi kita bisa involve di sana. Selanjutnya, ya makasih. Kewajiban untuk mengawas clinical trial, IST dan IIT itu, tapi nggak cuma jatuh di kita doang. Untungnya, ada badan-badan lain juga, termasuk badan-badan kepemerintahan, yang mesti provide regulatory oversight. Di sini saya cuma mau cerita dikit tentang yang saya mengerti ya dari badan kepemerintahan di negara-negara yang saya ada pengalaman. Kira-kira ada 4 bagian lah in general. Pertama itu badan-badan ini biasanya punya dokumen yang outline legal responsibilities of pharmaceutical sponsors. Apa aja yang mereka wajib untuk lakukan supaya bisa menjalankan clinical trial di negara tersebut. Dalam perjalanan clinical trial, badan-badan ini juga punya oversight, mereka akan memantau safety patient dan integritas study data. Setelah akhir, kalau udah terakhir banget, studinya udah komplit, hasilnya udah ada, dan pada saat company itu mau apply untuk mengajukan supaya obat itu boleh beredar di negara itu juga saat badan-badan ini akan mengecek hasil semuanya. Hasil yang dicek ini biasanya lebih detail dibandingin publikasinya. Saya ngomong sedikit tentang 4 ini. Ya, legal responsibilities of pharmaceutical sponsors. Di dunia itu banyak guidance-nya. Jadi preclinical ini adalah saat obat belum pernah dicoba ke manusia. Sebelum boleh masuk ke manusia, first in human itu apa yang mesti di-complete. Pertama, chemistry dan manufacturing-nya harus jelas. Bahwa obat ini konsisten batch per batch. Jadi nggak batch yang ini lebih strong, ini lebih, jadi kan harus seimbang. Drug characterization dan target validation. Jadi yang mesti jelas obat ini targetnya apa dan konsisten targetnya itu doang gitu, nggak yang lain-lain. Dan selanjutnya toxicology, which is yang penting karena ini unsurnya safety. Jadi ada wajib animal study untuk safety pretty much. Ya ada sekarang udah mulai bergeser sedikit, tapi sebagian besar studi itu wajib untuk melaksanakan animal study untuk safety. Ada yang disebutnya GLP, Good Laboratory Practice, ini adalah satu set international rules yang mengkontrol quality system bahwa animal study ini safety-nya dijalankan dengan baik. Mesti ada study plan-nya, dan ada minimum kriterianya, data-data apa aja yang di-collect, dengan cara apa, dan nanti reportnya juga harus jelas. Dari situ, nanti baru kita bisa calculate dosis yang aman untuk masuk ke manusia itu apa. Kalau itu udah oke, baru kita masuk ke clinical package. Nah, ini lagi yang clinical study protocol, study design, endpoint, developing materials yang buat pasien, jadi patient informed consent form. Jadi materi-materi ini dalam bahasa layperson supaya pasien bisa baca langsung. Study manuals ini banyakkan untuk sponsor karena mereka ada kewajiban untuk memonitor site gitu, untuk penuhi legal responsibilities mereka. Selama menjalankan clinical trial, under clinical itu juga sponsor wajib untuk memonitor rumah sakit yang menjalankan clinical trialnya. Safety patient udah pasti, harus. Mesti ada safety plan-nya juga. Tapi data integritas itu juga sangat penting. Biasanya mereka akan kirim monitor untuk pergi ke rumah sakit untuk cek apakah data yang masuk ke EDC atau data capture-nya itu sama nggak sama data yang ada di sana. Akurat atau enggak. Dan di terakhir studi konklusi itu ada sebagian besar badan pemerintah yang mengawas clinical trial akan meminta clinical study report. Ini juga ada ICH standard, International Conference of Harmonization, ada standarnya apa aja yang perlu diisi. Itu sangat detail, jauh lebih detail dibandingkan paper yang dipublish. Jadi rumah sakitnya apa aja, dokternya siapa aja, pasiennya itu karakteristiknya gimana, obatnya, dosisnya, batch-nya, terus safety-nya. Safety-nya itu adalah efek samping nggak hanya yang related ke obatnya, yang unrelated juga mau ditampilkan in case ada signal-signal di sana. Dan efficacy tentunya. Jadi semua ini harus di-justify study conclusion-nya. Selanjutnya. Ya. Kalau oversight safety itu rata-rata badan kesehatan sering monitornya efek sampingnya, dan efek samping itu kan ada beberapa jenis. Ada yang criteria for seriousness ini juga globally accepted. Jadi kalau efek samping yang menyebabkan hospitalization, prolongation of hospitalization, patient morbidity, birth defect atau kematian itu dihitungnya serius. Untuk obat-obat tertentu ada adverse event of special interest. Jadi katakanlah HER2 gitu, kalau efek sampingnya jantung itu of special interest. Atau pregnancy, kehamilan, apakah pasien dalam clinical trial atau partner dari pasien di clinical trial. Biasanya kategorinya adalah SUSAR, sudden unexpected and serious adverse reaction. Jadi kalau ada efek samping yang related ke drug, which is serious dan unexpected. Jadi sebelumnya kita nggak tahu, udah pernah ada data klinis seperti ini, itu wajib dilaporkan ke badan-badan kesehatan ini. Kalau tidak menyebabkan kematian, rata-rata 15 hari, sebagian besar negara. Kalau menyebabkan kematian, biasanya 7 hari harus dilaporkan ke badan-badan ini, karena badan-badan ini punya kekuatan untuk menutup clinical trial. Nggak aman, tutup clinical trialnya itu. Selanjutnya. Dan integrity data itu juga sangat penting karena kita akan rely untuk data-data ini untuk treatment pasien-pasien di masa depan. Jadi audit. Seringkali badan-badan kepemerintahan ini mengadakan audit juga clinical trial yang lagi berjalan. Katakanlah obatnya ini kelihatannya hasilnya udah mulai positif gitu loh. Seringkali mereka audit rumah sakit yang menjalankan clinical trial itu untuk clinical trial itu. Jadi USFDA audit, TGA audit, suka ada. Kan sponsor biasanya juga udah tahu standar apa gitu yang mereka harus laksanakan dan mereka mau untuk mencapai target itu. Kenapa? Karena kalau mereka nggak mencapai itu, nanti pada saat mereka minta mengajukan untuk obat ini di-approve, itu mereka akan dapat masalah juga kan. Oh, kalau kalian nggak begini, kok kalian nggak begitu. Jadi mereka juga suka employ independent auditors. Jadi ini adalah company-company, biasanya definisi independensi adalah mereka tidak untung dan tidak rugi kalau obat ini berhasil atau enggak. Jadi mereka biasanya audit rumah sakit yang menjalankan clinical trial mereka ini. Dan nanti auditnya juga dimasukkan dalam clinical study report tadi yang report akhir clinical uji klinis. Selanjutnya. Ya, ini maaf ya agak kepotong dikit salah. Kalau udah obatnya clinical trial udah kelar semua, company ini mau apply untuk approval di dalam satu negara itu, biasanya yang approve juga nggak hanya satu orang. Jadi ada satu komite yang cek ini. Scientific experts, physician researcher seperti kita, statisticians, chemists, biologists, consumer representative itu biasanya pasien di disease type yang sedang diuji. Tapi juga ada orang-orang lain, biasanya ada industri representative, kadang-kadang ada pasien, mungkin bukan di disease type itu, tapi dia udah biasa ngecek data-data untuk obat yang minta persetujuan. Kalau di negara-negara berkembang, minutes dan conclusions dari diskusi-diskusi ini itu semua ada di website publik. Jadi kita bisa lihat, kita bisa tahu persis datanya apa, yang di-review, diskusinya apa, kenapa konklusinya seperti ini. Ya, jadi kita sebagai clinical academic itu punya role yang penting ya dalam drug development. Kalau waktu awal-awal kayaknya sponsor studies gitu, agak-agak rasanya kayak masuk mulut singa sedikit, kayak ya agak-agak intimidating. Tapi kayak ikan ini clownfish gitu loh, nggak perlu takut disengat anemon karena kita berjubah integritas. Kita punya integritas yang tinggi dan itu memang kita punya role penting di sana. Jadi nggak hanya kita memberikan benefit untuk anemonnya, tapi anemonnya juga memberikan benefit untuk clownfish-nya. Jadi dia juga memberikan protection and shelter. Adalah satu partnership untuk kebaikan pasien kita. Ya. Selanjutnya, ya ini yang terakhir. Memang banyak stakeholders di research. Dan harus seperti itu karena memang no one can walk alone. Kayak yang tadi Dr. Saiful bilang, requires a network of collaboration. Academic clinician kayak kita, commercial sponsor, scientists, policy makers, and regulators. Tapi di dasar semua itu adalah harus untuk pasien. Tetap harus untuk kebaikan pasien kita. Dan kita coba untuk berjalan di tengah ini yang terbaik, yang terbaik yang semua bisa berikan untuk pasien. Ya. Terima kasih. Saya senang sekali bisa di sini.
Oke, terima kasih Dr. Amy. We can give a big applause to Dr. Amy ya. Jadi Dr. Amy ini kita import langsung ya supaya karena sudah banyak memberikan kontribusi Australia, so we have to be fair. So okay, so now what can you give contribution to Indonesia gitu ya Dr. Amy?
Dan Siprus itu nggak ada masalah sesuatu, kok bisa mens ya?
Oke, ini ada yang bocor ya. Oke, baik. Mungkin Bapak Ibu kita bisa masuk ke sesi tanya jawab ya. So we are going to the Q&A sessions. Jadi silakan siapa yang akan apakah ada yang mau bertanya secara langsung kepada Ibu Amy? Oke, so saya bisa lihat. Oke, Bapak Denny Gozali, saya persilakan.
Baik, terima kasih banyak. Selamat siang.
Siang.
Perkenalkan saya Ahmad Dhani dari FKUI. Eh, mau menanyakan mengenai apa yang tadi telah dipaparkan Dr. Emi. Sebelumnya saya senang sekali ada representasi orang Indonesia di luar dan memegang posisi sebagai head begitu dalam uji klinis di Australia ya tadi Dr. Emi. Salam kenal, Dok.
Salam kenal. Aduh, saya bangga banget loh diundang ke sini. Bener-bener ya.
Ya, baik Dok. Saya mau menanyakan Dok terkait dengan uji klinis yang mana sponsor dari Big Pharmaceutical Company itu mendanai proyek kita, Dok. Terkadang mereka kan juga punya entah in-house CRO ataupun dengan pihak ketiga CRO, mereka punya tim market access yang ingin memprediksi lebih cepat apakah hasilnya positif atau enggak dan siap dipasarkan di publik ataupun di internasional begitu. Nah, sebagai saya di akademik di FKUI ini pernah menjalani uji klinis baik itu tingkat global maupun yang tingkat nasional, Dok. Yang mau saya tanyakan ketika kita dalam proses perjalanan menghasilkan data, kerap kali kita kan punya integritas data ini harus kita verifikasi terlebih dahulu sebelum akhirnya rilis, termasuk kepada sponsor gitu. Tapi kadang pihak sponsor menginginkan adanya dalam tanda kutip bocoran data untuk bisa market aksesnya itu melihat ke arah ke depannya. Dan pertanyaan saya adalah ada dua sebetulnya. Yang pertama, sebetulnya data ini milik kepemilikan siapa dalam hal untuk bisa mengakses dan bisa menginterpretasikan. Yang kedua, sebagai akademik, apakah ada cara untuk kita menjadi sebuah institusi yang tidak hanya sebagai tempat untuk menjalankan uji klinik yang nantinya punya nama begitu, tapi ada juga metode transfer, technological transfer, yang mana nantinya bisa meningkatkan posisi kita sebagai pihak yang punya kontribusi dalam hal ini meningkatkan kesehatan masyarakat di Indonesia. Terima kasih kepada tim Kemenkes untuk kesempatannya.
Ya,
Mari.
terima kasih dok. Silakan Dok Emi untuk jawab.
Ya, Dokter Dani, pertanyaannya bagus sekali. Saya senang sekali. Saya mau jawab yang nomor 2 dulu ya. Soalnya itu seru. Karena begini, saya setuju banget sama dokter. Karena kalau kita sudah jadi institusi uji klinis ini, sebenarnya itu satu basis. Karena kita udah punya partnership, kita punya relationship sama sponsors ini. Apalagi kalau kita semakin banyak multiple sponsors dan kita rekrutmen yang besar, kita kualitas dan integritasnya tinggi, itu akan jadi basis yang baik. Persis seperti dokter Dani bilang. Itu untuk translational studies. Nanti kita bisa mengembangkan tech transfer, scientific research on top of this gitu. Jadi kita nggak hanya jadi uji klinis aja. Itu biasanya bordering on IIT ya. Jadi biasanya kalau sebagian farmasi besar, mungkin Dokter Dani juga udah tahu. Kalau udah tahu, aku dipotong aja ya. Soalnya sebagian besar farmasi besar itu punya channel khusus untuk IIT. Jadi mereka biasa memang banyak yang apply. Biasanya tiap tahun mereka suka mengedarkan prioritas untuk mereka tahun ini apa aja. Kalau onkologi terutama misalnya tahun ini kita mau advanced pancreatic cancer atau advanced kidney cancer di bidang ini gitu. Jadi nanti kita bisa mengajukan dua jenis. Kita mau misalnya tadi seperti Dokter Saiful bilang obat yang ini di indikasi lain atau seperti yang Dokter Dani bilang itu exciting banget. Kita bilang kita nih punya scientific researcher yang bergerak di bidang ini. Interestnya di sini, kita udah punya data seperti ini. Kita mau riset tambahan, misalnya biomarker atau apa, karena obat ini cocoknya dengan biomarker ini kemungkinan begini gitu. Jadi itu juga translational research itu bisa berkembang, tapi biasanya didasari dari partnership yang baik, hubungan baik dan good intentions from both sides. Dari situ saya balik ke Dokter Dani punya ide kayaknya. Ayo dok.
Oh enggak, silakan Dok, silakan.
Oh ya. Ya, kalau kembali ke pertanyaan pertama, data ini milik siapa? Kalau IIT itu mungkin beda dengan IST ya. Yang lebih gampang dulu deh IST. Kalau misalnya industry sponsor trials itu biasanya jelas karena kita udah kontrak CTRA Clinical Trials Research Agreement. Data yang di-identified patient data itu adalah kita wajib untuk memasukkan, saya pasiennya datang. biasanya tuh jelang 5 hari, 5 business days, kita udah mesti masukin datanya ke electronic data capture. Nanti dari electronic data capture, data itu adalah milik dari sponsor. Nah, tapi bukan berarti kita nggak boleh akses data itu ever. Kita bisa juga kolaborasi dengan mereka. Kalau kita punya ide, kita approach mereka dengan relationship yang baik ini. Oh, kita punya ide kenapa datanya nggak begini-begini. Itu kalau IST. Nah, kalau yang Dokter Deni tanya itu gimana kalau bocoran data itu, mungkin yang lebih gray ini biasanya IIT, dan itu memang gampang-gampang susah atau susah-susah gampang ya, karena biasanya itu negosiasi kontraknya atau ada disebutnya MTA, tapi MTA khusus untuk proyek ini dengan sponsornya. Jadi itu mesti janjian. Jadi pada saat sebelum kontraknya mesti negosiasi. Data ini punya siapa, nanti yang boleh berhak publikasi siapa, kelanjutannya gimana, itu negosiasi. Dan tahu saya cuma pernah involve di sedikit beberapa IT itu proses negosiasinya beda per proyek dan tergantung sponsornya, dan dari sponsornya juga tergantung tim sponsor yang mana, mereka lagi obatnya di mana gitu, yang mereka lebih kasih atau lebih lebih dia kekang gitu loh datanya.
Baik, terima kasih. Kelihatannya memang harus membaca situasi dulu ya, behavior dari company ya ini, untuk bisa negosiasi.
Tapi mereka juga, kalau menurut saya mereka juga ada niat baik ya, karena biarpun mereka komersil, tapi sejujurnya kalau itu tidak membantu pasien, itu tidak akan berhasil commercially. Jadi selalu yang saya bilang kayak if it's good for the patients, it's good for your drug development, and that's the truth gitu. Jadi untuk mereka ya itu, mereka juga ada niat baik untuk menjalin hubungan baik dengan kita. Mereka sering kok banyak punya patient advocate di dalam drug company-nya sendiri supaya benar-benar clinical endpoint itu adalah berarti gitu untuk pasien.
Oke, sudah terjawab ya, Dokter Dani ya. Oke, ya saya harap ini karena memang kita mengundang Dokter Amy ini sebagai representatif dari clinicians ya yang memang melakukan clinical trials IST maupun IIT, supaya Bapak Ibu semua para dokter clinician yang ada di rumah sakit bisa bisa belajar dari pengalaman beliau. Oke, ini apakah masih ada yang raise hand?
Ada.
Oh, Tanto, silakan Prof.
Ya. Baik, Dokter Amy, cuman satu hal, bahwa kami sangat bangga sekali terhadap Anda. Oke, jangan lupa negara Anda Indonesia. Pertanyaan-pertanyaan saya itu sudah tercover dalam sedikit banyak jawabannya, tapi saya cuma mau deep diving saja. Yaitu tentang pertama adalah data ownership, data transfer, dan benefit sharing. Apakah kita sepakat bahwa sebenarnya itu data itu milik pasien yang kita akses karena adanya informed consent terhadap subjek penelitian. Selanjutnya, at any time, pasien itu bisa merevoke datanya kembali, dan kemudian juga apakah untuk itu diperlukan yang namanya data controller. Pertanyaannya adalah tadi ya, ketika suatu clinical trial terjadi, maka data controllernya apakah akan bisa beralih kepada sponsor ataukah terdapat pada institusi yang bekerja sama dengan hal itu. Ada 3 pertanyaan saya, akan tapi satu-satu atau jadi satu yang nanya? Satu aja ya?
Satu aja Prof ya, boleh.
Nah, oke. Yang kedua itu adalah bagaimana peranan dari site. Apakah dia itu hanya sebagai tempat untuk diambil saja atau dia boleh bernegosiasi. Kemudian juga dalam hal IICT itu apa saja hak dari PI yang di bawah institusi. Soalnya kan yang bernegosiasi institusi terhadap data-data dan itu tadi. Kota kuncinya adalah data. Dan terima kasih. Sementara itu.
Ya, terima kasih Prof. Silakan Dok Amy.
Terima kasih Bu Indri. Prof Prof, terima kasih banyak atas pertanyaannya. Singkatnya sih saya setuju. Pertamanya tuh saya setuju bahwa um, data custodianship, data ownership itu memang penting. Karena memang data itu milik pasien ya. Dan kita ya consciously doing this research untuk kebaikan mereka dan untuk future pasien juga. Jadi informed consent itu 100% aku setuju. Bahwa pasien itu punya kontrol dari informed consent mereka. Kalau mereka sudah tidak mau partisipasi lagi, mereka bisa tarik datanya. Cuman biasanya kalau untuk tarik data yang sudah ada itu seringan kan mereka akan tanda tangan juga ya informed consent form. Biasanya tidak bisa, tapi saya setuju sama Prof. Kalau ke depannya mereka tidak mau lagi, boleh ditarik gitu. Dan biasanya kalau sampel ya misalnya data dari itu juga bisa mereka bisa tik oh mau ini atau enggak gitu ke genetik especially kan sangat touchy. Betul. Dan aku rasa poin yang Prof bilang itu data custodianship itu dari sponsor versus institusi itu memang penting. Dan itu adalah satu bagian yang sangat penting dari CTRA, Clinical Trials Research Agreement. Karena saya juga di Australia, saya juga senangnya bergerak di bidang publik. By choice, saya nggak mau pergi ke private karena saya senang bergerak di bidang publik. Jadi memang ada satu bagian kalau di rumah sakit di Sydney dari local health district kita ada data custodian. Jadi kita mesti minta approval dari data custodian setiap kali kita mau menjalankan clinical trial. Jadi udah ada cek di sana, check balance di sana.
Apakah data custodian itu apakah dari government, public atau dari private?
Dari government. Jadi kalau di rumah sakit di Australia itu dari local health district ya. Jadi kumpulan beberapa rumah sakit di satu distrik, dia punya data custodian di sana. Kita sering mesti minta itu on top of komite etik. Soalnya sebenarnya peranan paling besar di sini adalah komite etik. Kalau komite etik itu tugasnya kan biasanya kan mereka juga satu komite, nggak hanya clinician, ada scientist, juga ada pasien advocate di sana. Jadi mereka lihat apakah clinical trial ini, apakah perjanjian ini antara yang CTRA-nya itu adalah baik atau tidak baik untuk benefit pasien.
Jadi artinya adalah komite etik itu tadi juga meninjau juga perjanjian clinical trial agreement.
Ya.
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 Komite etik, maaf, komite etik tidak meninjau clinical trials agreement. Tapi kalau di rumah sakit publik di Australia, biasanya institusi itu ada satu disebutnya Research Governance Office atau Research Support Office. Mereka akan melihat pertimbangan dari komite etik. Kalau sudah ada persetujuan dari komite etik, mereka lihat clinical trials research agreement-nya di sana. Dan mereka akan konsul dengan departemen-departemen yang di-involve. Jadi misalnya kalau kita cancer trial, mereka akan lihat, oh pakai radiologi, jadi departemen radiologi harus setuju. Oh pakai patologi harus setuju, seperti itu. Dan mereka yang biasanya responsible data custodian itu biasanya duduknya di sana.
Lalu siapa yang akan terlibat dalam negosiasi penyusunan clinical trial agreement di tempat Anda?
Ya, itu poin yang sangat penting dan setiap negara dan institusi memang sedikit beda. Kalau di Australia, kita punya standar CTRA disebutnya yang dibikin dari Medicines Australia. Ya, jadi karena itu yang bikin adalah government body, kita biasanya paling senang kalau pakai kontrak dari Medicines Australia. Kita tahu bahwa kita yakin bahwa itu kontrak tidak
tidak merugikan salah satu pihak gitu ya.
Pasien kita ya, betul.
Ya. Jadi kalau gitu pada clinical trial ini tadi datanya kan jelas kan tetap milik daripada pasien dan ada kustodiannya yaitu si paling tidak negara. Dalam hal ini BB Binomika di bawah Bu Indri itulah yang akan menjadi data custodian negara itu ya Bu ya. Baik. Kemudian ya. Silakan.
Maaf Prof, kalau mungkin supaya diperjelas sedikit, data itu mungkin ada dua jenis ya. Kalau data yang saya setuju sama Prof bahwa data itu adalah milik pasien. Awalnya adalah selalu milik pasien. Tapi data yang sudah kita masukkan, yang de-identified, yang tidak ada namanya, yang anonymous itu tergantung CTRA. Karena itu sudah tidak ada nama pasiennya lagi dan kadang seringan kan kayak tanggal lahir aja diganti gitu, cuman tahun lahirnya aja, tapi selalu 1 Juli tahun sekian.
Apakah pendapat dokter, mohon maaf, menurut pendapat dokter itu masih pantas kalau misalnya menegosiasikan bahwa pihak Indonesia sebagai PI dan institusinya tadi meminta bahwasanya data yang ada di dalam CRF, Clinical Report Form, itu adalah tetap under control dari institusi di Indonesia, tapi si sponsor itu diberikan akses seluas-luasnya untuk menggunakan data ini, akan tetapi tidak boleh menjual atau mentransfernya dan lain. Apakah itu masih pantas, Bu, kalau dinegosiasikan menurut Ibu?
Mungkin ini perbedaan antara IST dan IT ya, Prof. Jadi kalau IST itu biasanya standarnya kalau sudah di-identified itu adalah sudah pergi ke sponsor. Tapi kalau IIT boleh dinegosiasikan. Malah harus kayaknya kita coba supaya kalau mau publikasi mesti bilang-bilang kita ya, ini kan data kita gitu.
Maaf, yang terakhir nih, terakhir beneran itu adalah sebagai seorang PI yang di bawah bekerja di bawah institusi, apa hak-hak PI kalau yang di Australia terhadap ini? Apakah misalnya ide-ide dari si PI yang asli, yang genuine tadi, kemudian ketika dinegosiasikan jadi 100% milik institusinya. Misalnya ada Dr. Ghazali tadi mempunyai ide yang hebat, kemudian oleh FKUI jadi dimiliki seluruhnya tanpa ada pembagian sedikit pun pada PI. Terima kasih. Mudah-mudahan masih tetap ingat Indonesia, Bu Ani. Terima kasih.
Prof, pertanyaannya bagus sekali dan sulit ya. Karena memang topik itu memang karena saya juga masih di Uni, kadang-kadang saya juga ditanya sama orang Uni, gimana sih kontraknya kalau sama sponsor, kok kita kalau sama ini gimana ya gitu. Dan dari industri juga kadang-kadang kita suka tech transfer, jadi spin out companies gitu dari universitas gitu kan. Itu rasanya saya sulit untuk menjawab karena kurang pengalaman. Jadi karena begini, Prof, waktu pada saat kita di-employ dari perusahaan manapun, nggak hanya universitas, misalnya saya di-employ sama rumah sakit saya pun, itu saya udah tanda tangan kalau misalnya saya menemukan apa-apa dalam waktu yang mereka berikan kepada saya. Jadi dalam waktu kerja saya menemukan something, itu adalah hak milik rumah sakit. Dan terus
And you
terang
get nothing, apa begitu?
ya. Tapi kalau yang saya kerjakan di luar dari jam kerja saya dan di luar dari, soalnya kan saya sebagai anggota saya sebagai lecturer misalnya gitu, saya punya advantages yang diberikan kepada saya. Misalnya akses ke library, paper semua gratis gitu kan. Ada fasilitas juga, saya bisa pakai fasilitas lab, saya bisa pakai fasilitas ini itu. Jadi kalau yang saya temukan ini biasanya ya, ini cuman dari yang sempit yang aku tahu. Jadi ya itu. Jadi kalau kita dengan dalam waktu kerja saya dengan fasilitas yang diberikan dipercayakan kepada saya dalam konteks kerjaan itu adalah milik rumah sakit. Dan waktu saya di industri, saya pernah di industri sebentar. Waktu itu juga saya tanda tangan kontrak juga sama di industri juga sama, Prof. Jadi kalau saya kerja buat perusahaan, saya pakai waktu perusahaan, fasilitas perusahaan, hasilnya juga diambil 100% sama perusahaan. Tapi yang Prof bilang itu adalah benar. Dan yang saya rasa bagian yang penting itu yang Prof touch itu adalah tech transfer. Gimana caranya kita supporting researchers yang beride besar, seperti Profesor, Dr. Ghazali. Kalau dia punya ide yang bagus, kita supportive mereka, punya tech transfer yang rapi, punya agreement yang rapi, mereka bisa bikin spin out company gitu. Nantinya Indonesia punya obat gitu kan, punya riset yang baik, punya obat yang baik, go gitu loh. Gimana caranya universitas mendukung itu? Rasanya dari universitas-universitas yang saya pernah terlibat sih, mereka sangat ingin mendukung itu, tapi persis seperti yang Prof bilang, itu masalah yang penting bahwa perjanjiannya seperti ini. Tapi in a way, kalau dengan niat altruis yang sebaik-baiknya dari universitas ini, sebenarnya itu bisa menjadi satu advantage bahwa dengan pengalaman mereka yang segitu banyak, dengan koneksi dengan network mereka bisa mendukung investigators ini untuk maju lebih gitu loh. Dan bukan berarti mereka nggak bisa punya spin-out company, bisa, memang ada jalurnya. Tapi ya itu yang memang Prof itu tepat, sulit, susah pertanyaannya.
Iya, terima kasih. Iya, jadi diskusinya sangat ini ya. Jadi pada intinya memang setiap negara punya aturan masing-masing ya, tapi tujuannya memang kita untuk pasien gitu ya. Tadi udah dibahas tentang CTA dan sebagainya gitu ya. Memang Australia mereka punya template CTA, tapi kalau saya nggak salah, walaupun ada template, tapi mereka juga preferable to have the apa namanya revise of the template ya of the CTA ya. Tapi kalau memang menggunakan CTA yang Australia itu mereka jalan tol lah istilahnya begitu ya. Nah, kita Indonesia memang dalam proses menuju ke situ. Best practice di tiap negara itu berbeda-beda gitu ya. Jadi nanti kita sebagai di sini kita ada regulator, kemudian kita juga ada yang sebagai pelaku dan juga akademisi. Kita akan buat the streamlining the regulations dan juga kita akan buat makanya hari ini kita membuat webinar supaya clear bahwa sebetulnya seperti apa sih common practice yang dilakukan terkait dengan IIT versus IIST ini. Karena memang Indonesia sekarang kita still a little bit crawling gitu ya untuk clinical trials, but saya sangat optimis gitu dengan adanya sekarang si CRU animo untuk melakukan clinical trial itu sangat tinggi. Oleh karena itu kita coba untuk melakukan edukasi-edukasi dengan webinar seperti ini. So once again terima kasih Dr. Amy. So I think we come to the end of this webinar. So I would like to extend my gratitude to our esteemed speakers from Malaysia, Asha, and also Dr. Saiful. I'm very grateful that you are still stay here until the end of the webinar, and also Dr. Amy from Australia. For sharing their valuable insight. And I think through this experience, we've gained a clearer understanding of the benefits and challenges of both sponsored and clinical and investigator-initiated trials. So I hope our clinical research units especially, and I think here it's not only the CRU from the hospitals, we also invited the industry, pharmaceutical companies, sponsor, and CRO, inspired to apply this knowledge and take steps toward initiating more clinical trial. And thank you for your active participations. And I look forward to seeing the futures of the progress in clinical research and Indonesia's growth as a regional hub for clinical trials. I think that is our dream. And this webinar series will continue regularly, so stay tuned for future webinars with more exciting topic and speakers. And there is one announcement that we will have the launching of the CRC, I think in the mid of November. So the launching of the CRC, also the launching of the INA clinical research registry, and then the digitalization of the material transfer agreement. So the event is on the 16th of October, so apologize. 16th of October, that will be launching. And then, yes, so stay tuned for future webinars with more exciting topic and speakers. Wishing you all a great day ahead. So I'll give it back to our MC, Ibu Dona, please.
Thank you, Ibu Indri, and all of our speakers. This is a very fruitful discussion. Hopefully, we can benefit from this webinar. So after the main session, I invite the participant to participate to our fun event. Yeah, we have quiz, and we have also prize vouchers for 2 winners ya. Jadi para peserta sekalian ya, kalau misalnya masih berkenan bergabung beberapa menit lagi, kita ada quiz, nanti ada hadiah untuk 2 orang pemenang. Kami persilakan Ibu Nadira untuk memimpin acara kuis ini. Silakan.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih Mbak Dona dan selamat siang Bapak Ibu peserta webinar sekalian. Nah, setelah tadi kita udah mendengar banyak materi dari 3 pembicara kita, selanjutnya kita akan lanjut ke sesi kuis nih. Mungkin aku izin untuk share screen juga ya. Oke, nah kita akan lanjut ke sesi kuis nih menggunakan aplikasi Kahoot. Nah, tapi sebelum join, mungkin sedikit reminder lagi untuk jangan lupa untuk follow akun Instagram INASIRC ya, karena nanti kalau misalnya menang pun juga harus mengirimkan bukti sudah follow IG INASIRC, jadi jangan lupa di follow. Nah, buat Bapak Ibu sekalian boleh langsung gunakan device-nya masing-masing untuk ke website Kahoot, bisa langsung ke kahoot.it, kemudian nanti akan diminta untuk memasukkan kode, boleh dimasukkan kodenya 986716. Oke, nah mungkin aku langsung izin untuk share screen Kahoot-nya ya, karena tadi aku lihat udah ada beberapa yang join nih. Oke, nah sekali lagi mungkin boleh langsung di join aja lewat websitenya www.kahoot.it, kahoot.it. Kemudian nanti akan diminta untuk memasukkan PIN. Boleh dimasukkan PIN-nya adalah 986716. Oke, mungkin biar kita bisa bermainnya langsung bareng-bareng nih kuisnya ditunggu dulu mungkin sekitar sampai jam 18.20 mungkin ya atau minimal 10 pemain. Oh, di sini banyak yang bilang PIN-nya tidak bisa ya. Coba sebentar.
Mbak Nadira nggak bisa nih.
Oh, oke. Coba sebentar aku eh, ini dulu ya.
Ganti pinnya kali ya, ganti.
Oke. Oke, mohon maaf ya, sebentar coba aku ulang dulu mungkin PIN-nya harus kita ubah dulu. Oke, mungkin sambil menunggu PIN-nya boleh disiapkan dulu ke website Kahoot-nya ya, biar nanti kalau udah ada PIN-nya bisa langsung kita join rame-rame. Oke. Oke, nah ini PIN-nya udah ganti nih, boleh langsung dicoba PIN yang baru. PIN yang baru adalah 9141501. Oke, mungkin boleh berkabar lagi ya kalau misalnya bisa atau ada kendala lagi. Oke, udah ada yang masuk. Bisa ya, Alhamdulillah. Oke, wah rame nih. Oke, rame ternyata ya, pada bersemangat nih. Oke, jangan lupa nih pemenangnya akan ada hadiah ya, 100.000 rupiah GoPay buat 2 orang pemenang. Buat terima sih. Wah, full lah. Wah, nyampe 100 lebih nih. Oh iya, OVO, maaf. 100.000 OVO ya, untuk masing-masing pemenang dan akan ada 2 pemenang. Oke, nah karena udah 11.20, aku langsung mulai aja kali ya. Jadi boleh bersiap-siap di device masing-masing. Kita akan mulai 3, 2, 1. Oke deh. Kuis inisiasi. Ini pertanyaannya berasal dari materi tadi ya. Jadi sekalian kita recall dan eh, bersama-sama nih. Oke, pertanyaan pertama. Antara Investigator-Initiated Trial dan Industry-Sponsored Trial yang biasanya didanai oleh grants pemerintah dan NGO adalah apa nih? Apakah IIT atau IST? Oke. Nah, ini masing-masing pertanyaan waktu menjawabnya sekitar 20 detik ya. Oke, sudah banyak yang menjawab nih. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oke, jawabannya adalah IIT. Oke, ternyata banyak yang benar ya. Masih ada yang salah, nggak apa-apa. Oke, kita lanjut ke pertanyaan berikutnya. Oh, ini ada papan skornya. Oke, pertanyaan kedua. Berikut merupakan bidang penelitian yang sedang berkembang untuk IIT di Asia Tenggara, kecuali, nah ini tadi ada pemaparan dari pembicara dari Malaysia nih. Apa nih kira-kira? Apakah precision medicine, personalized healthcare, atau kesehatan lingkungan dan climate change, kesehatan mental dan well-being, atau penyakit neurodegeneratif? Dan ini kecuali ya, jangan lupa ini tanya adalah kecuali, jadi jangan terkecoh. Oke, 10 detik lagi waktunya, boleh dijawab nih. Alhamdulillah ternyata masih pada semangat ya siang-siang ini ya. Oke, 5, 4, 3, 2, dan 1. Oke, ternyata kecuali penyakit neurodegeneratif ya, ternyata yang benar 28 orang. Oke, nggak apa-apa, masih banyak kesempatan karena pertanyaannya masih banyak. Oke, pertanyaan ketiga. Berikut ini merupakan kesulitan yang dihadapi dalam IITs, kecuali. Nah, tadi ada, ini termasuk materi yang tadi dipaparkan oleh Dr. Amy nih, kalau nggak salah. Kira-kira siapa nih yang mendapatkan jawabannya benar nih? Apakah kurangnya akses obat? Apakah kurangnya jejaring? Apakah kurangnya manpower? Atau kurangnya pendanaan? Dan ini juga yang ditanya adalah kecuali ya. Oke. Oke, jawabannya adalah kecuali kurangnya jejaring ya ternyata. Ya, selamat buat yang benar. Dan kita lanjut ke pertanyaan berikutnya. Oke, pertanyaan keempat. Antara Investigator-Initiated Trials dan IST, mana yang lebih mudah mendapatkan funding dan resource? Tadi menurut materi yang telah disampaikan ya. Apakah IIT? Apakah IST? Oke, yuk semangat-semangat. Untuk mendapatkan OVO nih, kita ada hadiah OVO ya untuk 2 orang pemenang. Oke, masih ada waktu untuk menjawab. Sudah banyak yang menjawab. 135, 321. Nah, ternyata jawabannya adalah IST. Oke, nah sekarang Irsyad ABD nih di posisi teratas. Ayo semuanya jangan mau kalah sama Irsyad ABD. Oke, next question berikut ini bidang clinical research yang paling banyak mendapatkan sponsor di Malaysia selama tahun 2012 sampai 2023. Nah, tadi ada di paparan juga nih kira-kira apa tuh? Apakah infections and infectious disease? Apakah oncology? Apakah cardiovascular vascular disease atau pediatrics? Kira-kira apa nih? Oke, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mari kita lihat jawabannya. Yang paling banyak disponsori di Malaysia adalah onkologi ternyata. Oke, wah ternyata sudah lumayan susulan nih ya. Juara 1 dan juara 2-nya. Oke, kita next. Ke pertanyaan 6, masih banyak nih Bapak Ibu, jadi jangan khawatir. Oke, clinical study protocol pada industri sponsor trials itu merupakan tanggung jawab dari siapa? Apakah tanggung jawab dari sponsor? Apakah tanggung jawab dari investigator atau dari regulator? Oke. Oke deh, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Dan ternyata merupakan tanggung jawab dari sponsor ya. Oke, Tris, selamat yang sudah benar nih. Masih dari Bu Nurlia yang di posisi teratas. Oke, ayo. Jangan mau kalah nih yang lain untuk dapat OVO. Oke, next question. Berikut ini beberapa hal yang dilakukan eh, NIH, IHR, ICR untuk mengatasi tantangan IITs di Malaysia. Kecuali apa nih? Apakah mereka mengadakan capacity building, mempublikasikan guideline IITs, memperkuat public-private partnership, meningkatkan stakeholder engagement, dan ini kecuali apa yang tidak mereka lakukan berarti. Oke, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, dan 1. Jawabannya adalah ternyata yang tidak adalah mempublikasikan guideline IITs ya, berarti yang lainnya dilakukan. Oke, masih juara bertahan ya, 2 orang teratas. Ayo kita next. Berikut merupakan peran clinical investigator pada fase studi completion atau setelahnya ya, kecuali apa nih? Apakah data interpretation, apakah publication, conclusion, atau dissemination? Apa yang bukan merupakan perannya? Oke, yuk kita sudah halfway, pertanyaannya sudah setengah jalan, tapi masih ada kesempatan untuk yang mau mengejar, untuk mendapatkan OVO, dan sekalian recall-recall materi lagi. Oke, jawabannya adalah ternyata kecuali dissemination, ternyata tidak termasuk dari perannya. Oke, masih juara bertahan, nggak apa-apa kita lanjut ke pertanyaan berikutnya. Pertanyaan nomor 9 dari 13, berikut ini beberapa peluang Indonesia untuk berkolaborasi dengan Malaysia untuk Investigator-Initiated Trials, kecuali apa nih? Yang bukan merupakan peluang kita. Apakah kita memiliki prioritas regional yang sama, kemiripan dalam sistem kesehatan, sumber pendanaan yang sama, dan sumber daya dan keahlian serupa? Kecuali, nah berarti yang bukan merupakan peluang kita nih. Yang salah berarti ya. Oke, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, dan 1. Oke, ternyata yang bukan adalah sumber pendanaan yang sama ya. Dan sisanya merupakan peluang kita nih. Oke, update papan skor masih sama, Nurlia dan Irsyad ABD. Ayo, semoga yang lain masih bisa menyusul ya. Oke, pertanyaan nomor 10. Sudah berapa lama Clinical Research Malaysia, CRM Malaysia resmi berdiri sejak pertama kali dibentuk oleh Kementerian Kesehatan Malaysia? Nah, kira-kira sudah berapa tahun tuh? Tadi sempat dipaparkan juga ya, tahun berapa mulai berdiri. Berarti kalau misalnya tahun ini 2024, kira-kira sudah berapa tahun tuh? Apakah 10 tahun? Apakah 15, 12, atau 20? Oke, 7, 6, 5, 4. Kira-kira siapa nih yang benar nih? 2, 1. Oke, oh banyak yang benar ya, ternyata 71 orang benar, sudah 12 tahun cara Malaysia telah berdiri. Oke, keren-keren banget nih. Oke, sekarang sudah pertanyaan kedua terakhir ya. Berikut ini merupakan bagian dari ekosistem Investigator-Initiated Trials IIT di Malaysia. Kecuali apa? Berarti yang bukan merupakan bagian dari ekosistemnya ya. Apakah investigator, apakah funding agencies, apakah industry partners, atau primary healthcare yang bukan merupakan. Oke, masih ada waktu untuk menjawab. Oke, 5, 4,
Udah no.
3, 2, 1. Oke, ternyata banyak yang benar juga ya.
Benar. Makasih Mbak Wi.
Ya, jawabannya primary healthcare. Oke, kita ke pertanyaan terakhir dan
Nah, itu bukanya barengan juga ya? Jangan kebanyakan. Gitu ya.
oke, pertanyaan terakhir yang bukan merupakan investigator dalam ekosistem IITs di Malaysia adalah apa
Ini
nih?
nih, belum absen nih. Dokter Putri turun aja
Oke.
ke dokter Galuh.
Nah, apakah peneliti, apakah personil Kementerian Kesehatan, apakah personil non Kementerian Kesehatan atau pasien? Ini yang bukan merupakan investigator ya di ekosistem IITs di Malaysia. Apa nih yang bukan investigator?
27 dan 28 kata Risa akhir November aja biar pesertanya banyak. Oh, berarti ini kalau
Oke,
dadakan
ternyata mayoritas benar. Selamat, jawabannya adalah
ini
pasien.
jadinya ya.
Oke,
27. Selasa Rabu.
apakah kita pertanyaannya sudah selesai? Oh, pertanyaan terakhir masih ternyata pertanyaan terakhir. Oke. Sampai saat ini jumlah study coordinator yang dimiliki CRM Malaysia adalah sebanyak berapa orang? Apakah 198 orang, 100 orang, 500, atau 178? Oke, tadi juga sempat ada di paparan salah satu narasumber dari Malaysia ya mengenai CRM.
Ya.
Oke, apakah sampai sebanyak 500 atau apakah 100 atau di antaranya nih ada dua pilihan 5, 4, 3, 2, dan 1. Jawabannya banyak yang benar ternyata 198 orang. Oke. Nah, kita sudah selesai dan sudah menemukan pemenangnya.
Informasi.
Selamat kepada Bapak Hendrik, yang kedua Pak Irsyad, Dani, yang juara pertama adalah dari Bu atau Mbak Nurlia. Oke, selamat kepada pemenang, mungkin boleh muncul juga di kolom komentar ya, biar panitia bisa melihat. Kemudian juga untuk para pemenang, untuk klaim hadiahnya, itu bisa menghubungi Mbak Saras dari Kemenkes ya. Ini ada nomornya di kolom chat. Bisa dihubungi Mbak Sarasnya. Dan jangan lupa juga untuk mencantumkan bukti screenshot kalau sudah follow Instagram dari Inasi Arsi. Oke deh, kalau gitu selamat sekali lagi kepada para pemenang. Semoga kuisnya bisa menjadi penyemangat dan juga pengingat. Kalau gitu, terima kasih. Aku kembalikan kepada Mbak Dona ya. Terima kasih semuanya. Terima kasih Mbak Dona.
Terima kasih Mbak Nadira, seru sekali loh kuisnya ya, dan apresiasi sekali untuk peserta webinar yang bertahan sampai dengan akhir, sampai dengan kuis ini, dan selamat untuk pemenang, 2 orang pemenang yang tadi ya. Silakan nanti ada persyaratannya ya untuk bisa mengklaim hadiah. Silakan menghubungi Basaras yang lihat keterangannya. Kemudian beserta dengan persyaratannya
aku salah deh.
akan voucher OVO 100.000.
Kamu ngapain di sana?
Oke, terima kasih atas partisipasinya peserta sekalian. Juga untuk
guys.
banyak terima kasih wawasan kita terkait dengan
Belum bayar, belum sama sekali.
yang sponsor dan juga
belum partisipasi. Yang ada yang masuk aja.
Yang saya kirim itu
bawa
gimana?
perubahan ya terhadap praktek kita sehari-hari dan memajukan penelitian klinik di Indonesia. Dengan demikian saya akhiri. Oh iya, untuk Mbak Nadira dan dari tim TBI, terima kasih loh bantuannya ya, sehingga membuat webinar kita menjadi lebih semarak. Dengan itu kami akhiri acara webinar kali ini. Seperti yang sudah disebutkan oleh Bu Indri tadi, kita ada next event adalah launching inisiasi pada tanggal 16 Oktober ya, save the date ya. Silakan nanti ditunggu undangannya ya. Mohon maaf nanti mungkin karena keterbatasan kapasitas, mungkin nanti ada undangan yang luring dan ada juga undangan yang daring ya. Bapak Ibu, terima kasih atas partisipasinya. Kami akhiri webinar kali ini. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.